get this started.
PMWS.
So, I will elaborate in just a second.
I think I know what this is.
Welcome everybody to Portal Mountain Development Meeting number 62.
That's right.
Yep. Correct. The Portal Mountain World Summit will be a topic today. We have so far technically two entries, including the summit itself, if you want. I'll go into detail about what that is. It's basically an evolving thing.
Would this be a project that belongs to it then?
It would depend. It could be if we could
do it.
Like set up specific goals.
Well, there is that in the dashboard. Those are like goal oriented.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like the idea is like a 3-month sprint. The first month is basically get your idea together, your project idea together.
Okay. Well, I think
we're in that phase right now.
I'm only saying this because I think I'm already contributing without realizing that I'm
For
even
sure.
participating.
Yeah, sure, yeah. Yep. I mean, that could be, we could kind of get together and agree,
Yeah.
what can we do in 3 months? Where could we possibly get to, especially with help, right? And then that's the idea, connecting people together, advertising.
So right now I don't have a machine to do work on. That's my biggest blocker.
Right.
But I do have...
So your computer broke, didn't it?
Yeah, but I do have an idea as to what could be done in the 3-month period with two of the projects. One being the language, and the other one being the dashboard. So at the very least, a conversation engine, for example, is a doable goal.
Right.
Provided we have a sense of the architecture itself. Yeah, I have.
Right.
For which I also have a shit ton of ideas.
And we've been discussing that for quite some time, the dashboard idea.
Yeah. To facilitate technological isomorphism, basically, in the computational medium. It's the only medium that allows for such modeling.
Right.
Being responsive and all.
Cool. So I'm just setting up and sharing. But yeah, we'll be continuing today to discuss about the APS language stack, stuff that we've been working on the last three meetings. See how far we get with that. Hopefully we were going to try and get into, like, kind of one of our goals with that was into the
offices
and the primordial archetypes, to kind of setting up the structure.
Yeah, like there's like this matrix of causality going upwards and then sideways.
Mm-hmm. Right, and so we've set up these
and then back downwards.
These different kind of like a language framework to be able to describe these offices, and the offices themselves as kind of like roles that you can take on, which interact with other offices to make whole organizations or whole organisms, however you want to say it, right?
Yeah. So if I may use the paper.
Sure.
I'm gonna draw a mental picture that I have in my head for what to expect out of this kind of concoction. So we have our language. Which gives us domains.
There.
Domains give us the guild language. Gives us a guild language. That gives us an archetype language. gives us our stack. All 12. When I say all 12, I mean from uncertainty going upwards to state.
Mm-hmm.
Which gives us stack.
I guess the wind is just really blowing because the camera doesn't want to stay steady.
That's okay. They can deal with a little seasickness. What is this? A formal presentation?
Something like that.
So,
And weren't there a bunch of like domains? That's already at the very top of our stack, right?
yeah, domains is like where the language ends, the technical aspect of the language ends, defining different domains and how they interact.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what you built out of in the domains becomes your guild language. So, starting off with
Fundamental guilds.
the fundamentals to the inner workings of of all the guilds
Mm-hmm.
as a structure. Then you take that all of that domain language that you get from developing guild. So guild language basically. You now use the guild language to start describing your archetype stack.
Mm-hmm.
That gives you your archetype language. This out of which the stack gets built. The stack language gives office language an ability to. So every time you have a language, what it means as to get to the next one is how do you put the pieces together of this language so that it makes a statement in the next language. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like English words are just English, but once you string them together into a sentence, you have also a thought, right? And then you use thoughts, stringing together of thoughts to paint a picture, stringing together of pictures to form an entire scene, right? And on it goes. So it's like you're utilizing the output of the previous incarnation of a previous language as the medium upon which you're moving bits and
Mhm.
pieces around. So you don't go below
Yeah.
that medium.
And so that structure is like the strange loop stacking structure,
Mm-hmm.
in which when something is spoken in a higher language, the entire stack responds in kind in its own its own
Down the
language.
layers,
It's
yeah.
in its own language.
Right. Yep.
Mhm.
So that way you don't, when you're thinking thoughts, you don't automatically get stuck parsing words. You're just picturing thoughts and scenes together.
Mhm.
You're not contemplating everything but using the alphabet, for example.
Right.
Like
Mhm.
you don't see a W or an A or an E in your words. You see the concepts of the words beyond the written part.
Right. Right. And you don't need to be
Fair warning.
concerned about like the language of electricity or electrical language uh, for like the ocular nerve impulses
Mhm.
translating between a photons hitting a sensor, and you don't have to speak that language, but it happens.
Yeah, like for example, when the light hits your cells, what happens is it knocks off an electron, and that knocking off an electron sets off a chain reaction. So it's actually a destructive process to begin with, out of which your eye needs to then heal.
Mhm.
It goes through that chain sends off the signal, and then the cell has to put itself back together, which is why, for example, staring at a bright light is actually leaves that dot in your vision,
Huh.
because it needs to reassemble. all of those
Acquire
cells,
another
all of those
electron.
cells that got quote unquote damaged in the process of seeing. Yeah. So your mind does not speak the language of that electron, right? Your mind does not even speak about the signals it's getting from its nervous system inputs. All it's doing, it's saying, oh, this is pleasure, this is pain, this is accumulates into this thought, this accumulates into that concept. Like, it doesn't care or needs to care about the individual cells, the individual signals passing through it. It behaves as a true medium, right? Like, and the medium is like a horizon.
Mm-hmm.
Much like we can't dip our conversation below words and gestures, right? Like, we can only do the whole body reading, facial expression reading, and talking, but we can't do like, we can't go below it and be like, oh, it's because you got a nerve impulse going from here to there, right? Like, none of that is part of the conversation. None of that even is considered part of the conversation. And even if it is, it's still at a higher level and not concerning itself with the actual processes that are making the conversation happen. It's like a model of the model.
Right. It's very regular, consistent. The stacking model, how it works, and I think it's interesting that once we get into the APS language stack we've been talking about, things do become, I guess, very right in your face and apparent. And all these different languages, we are actually sort of hacking them, right, directly. Right. It's
the
not
idea
like,
the idea that language has been at the forefront of manipulating the way we think and all of that kind of stuff has been, it's a dead horse to be beaten, basically. But because of it being such a dead horse, and no particular direction has been taken in trying to consolidate this issue, why not bridge the two worlds in which languages dominate? Programming and spoken are basically those places. It's the two spaces in which, if you don't write it down, it doesn't exist. And writing it down creates hyperstition. That's the connection. Like, once you write something down, there's a hyperstition.
if you're writing down model.
Anything. Well, reality is made through both bottom up and top down, right? Like, if concepts lead to concept that but the two original concepts originates from below, but the concept here originates from combining these two concepts up here, then there is no representation down below. There's only the initial representation of the two aforementioned concepts, right? So there's no clean jumps that you can make like that. Some things exist only within their layers as representation, with a use of representation underneath to convey it back and forth. So like, words don't exist in the air. They don't exist until they're spoken. But speaking words make them exist. It's a very small. It seems like almost an obvious detail, but that is not worth discussing. But this is the detail that gets tripped up in trying to think of where the strange loop is relevant in experience. Where how to notice it's doing layer jumping. And this is what the language actually goes. It goes into the nitty-gritty details of switching contexts only. But it stops short of doing anything else. And now you have this beast of a language that does context switching and only context switching. What do you feed it with? Well, give it contexts.
Mm-hmm.
And those contexts become our domains, and those domains facilitate all the different pieces that the guild language will need to have in place so that it could say its next thing. So like by the time we're talking about the fundamental guilds as a structure, we would have a domain of guilds, right? Like we will create a guild domain language. Once we create a guild domain language, we create the guild language itself, aka what does the fundamental guild speak? What does the membership guild speak? What does
Mm-hmm.
so and the way it's going to do it is going to use guild words to put into specific guild sentences, and those sentences then become the next words for the archetype language.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I get the overall gist of how things are fitting together.
It's the chunking thing.
But there's so many like languages and layers. It's like to me all kind of flying around.
Oh, they're flying all up and down for me even too, because my head, strictly speaking, is here. Like I don't have a lot of insight as to what this looks like.
Mm-hmm.
I have only insight into what this can look like. And that's because it just needs to do a specific job in a specific cycle. Right? So that was not that difficult to nail down. The content of the cycle is this.
Mm-hmm.
And you can upload different content into the cycle and it won't be this, so it will not be isomorphic.
Right. And so the idea of a domain is like a domain of interaction or something, a domain of like you could say a workplace is like a language where there's different objects and they speak a certain grammar.
Yeah. Context is another word that you would want to think about when you're talking about. Domain is more like here's your tool set, right? It belongs in this category, right?
Mm-hmm.
A context is like, okay, I got all these tools from all these different domains. Let's set up different contexts in which they're used.
And like for these, like I kind of wish we had these in charts or like if I could find my notes from last time, like context, domains,
So,
like all these different words,
one of
how
the
they fit
reasons I
together.
don't do those charts is because there's plenty of them out there. So this is domain-driven development stuff, and because I'm not changing the actual science of it at
Mhm.
all, it's basically if you want to read up about domain-driven, go ahead and familiarize yourself with how that works, because I'm only going to use the strict definition.
Yeah, like I remember our discussion about like the
Now,
lumberjack example with the bird and the tree.
Yeah.
Like what is a tree? Well, it depends on your context or
Is
whatever.
it my house, or is it my money, or is it my firewood, or is it
Right.
my table?
Mm-hmm.
So there's all these different ways to that's context switching, but you'll notice that all of these contexts have one domain in common, and that's the one of the tree. So the features of a tree and all of that is
Mhm.
presented through this is our domain. Now contexts is like in this domain, how do you look at it in this way, that way, the other way, the third way?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the APS language stack, that stuff is there to give a formal way of speaking in a way that the mind kind of operates, like how cognitive.
Right, to give essentially a language to talk about it. Oh, the subject stack switched.
Mhm.
Oh, our types and aspects were changed with the subject switch. Right?
And that's
Like
the
all of
tough.
these
The
kinds
tough
of
part
things.
about this kind of stuff is when people want to describe a situation or like, say, formalize a workplace with protocols or something like that. We tend to reify certain linear processes as like a set in stone kind of thing.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, that's an oversimplification, and actually everything can really be anything. So it's kind of like a really tough challenge for us to be able to speak in this
Yeah.
way that keeps potentiality open rather than restricting it onto a certain
It's funny you
process.
said that, because immediately as you said that, what I was thinking of, like, workplace protocols and enforcing them and all of that stuff. So you have, for example, two different contexts. Your manager that sees the workplace one way, and your employee who sees the workplace in a completely different context. Now, what you're speaking to is the said manager, for example,
Mm-hmm.
completely ignoring the employee context entirely, overriding it as if it doesn't exist, building up protocols and structures in in their own subjective
Yeah.
pyramid, right? Jamming that into a completely different context pyramid and saying, just sort of like,
Just do this.
yeah, like rewarding and punishing within that stack. And now,
Mhm.
and so I've often used the metaphor of, like, when the crusty APS is kind of like, it doesn't have that fractal feeling to it where every bit of it fits neatly into every other bit of it.
Right.
It has that jarring,
Mm-hmm.
crude edge that keeps slamming into other jarring, crude edges and cracking them and breaking them off, and it's constantly it's like a crystal growing in every different direction,
Mhm.
breaking it off of itself because it pushes against itself and
Right.
undermines its own structure.
So this is the obfuscated meta narrative.
Yeah, and this is a great jump to say how this language describes that. Like, this is why I'm kind of so this example that you brought up. It shows exactly what this language is trying to also delineate. That you have two different contexts, but the program is trying to run the wrong subjective framework for the algorithm that it's operating under. So if you do that, you're fucking shit up.
Mm-hmm.
In the programming world, this is called a logical error.
Right. In the corporate world, it's called business as usual.
Well, logical errors are business as usual.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like, totally on point with that.
Mm-hmm.
So the next question is like, okay, so how do we stop this from happening in the first place? What if this is the problem, the context switching and the context overriding? What do we do? Well, in this language, we have what's called context mapping. How does one context translate to another? So it creates a nice, specific bridge for how protocols go from one context into another context. So such that the context it's going into is the one that's responsible for that information. It's not owned by.
Who that is?
What is that phone cord?
Dustman. That's internet.
Jesus.
No Wi-Fi.
Fucking Stone Ages.
Sometimes
it works.
Sometimes those were the best stages.
Yep. Nostalgia.
Hardline.
You know me
Yeah, like the
and
Matrix.
what I'm all about.
In the Matrix, you gotta find the hard line. Can't just use your cell phone.
That's it. Makes it real.
Uh-huh.
Oh
Mhm.
shit.
Welcome to the live stream.
Yeah, I was just dropping off some garbage, so you guys were here.
So I'm a driver now.
Not here.
Mm-hmm.
Watch out.
Yeah, watch out for that white vans. Just
Yeah, I was
assume
gonna
it's
say,
him.
what are you driving, just so I know?
Oh fuck! This car's everywhere though. It's Dodge Grand Caravan. They're
Okay.
like literally fucking the whole city is full of them.
Yeah. Well, it's funny too. Whenever you have something, then you notice like how much.
That's
More
part
of
of
them
it. That's
there.
part of it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
But there is a significant like
Oh yeah.
quantity of them here.
No doubt.
So we were going into the beer store. A purple one was coming, basically almost T-boning me,
Okay.
thanks to this dude.
Not really. They're going like 50
Anyway,
in the 60s.
It's a purple
like,
version of
got
my
no time
car,
for
and
this.
then as soon as we turn in, see just like what was it coming the other way or something like that. Anyway, right there, two of them
Oh shit.
in the same
Mhm.
scene.
Crazy.
You were saying that they're sought after.
Just one of the most popular models
Like
out
a
there
Family
for
van.
family family people.
It's literally what.
You've got more than 3 kids. That's your.
That, well, 3 is already there.
Right.
Like, it's perfect for what we have right now.
Nice.
Yeah.
Sorry, I should say 3 more.
Well, no, it's a valid comment.
Yeah.
So I did the parrot thing, and one of the middle seats is on the floor.
Yes.
Chair, oldest is on the other side. So they got this big ass room in the middle of the car.
Right on.
Yeah, I haven't played too much with the entertainment system yet, but
Yeah. Well, those things, the seats fold right down, and you can stack sheets of material into it.
dude,
Like,
this thing
you
is
could fit,
this thing is a fucking truck.
15,
This
10,
thing is
15 sheets in it, bro.
This thing is a fucking truck if you put it all down.
Oh, yeah.
Because the middle seats, they fold right into the floor flat.
Yeah, everything sits flat.
And then I have the trunk is dipped lower,
Right.
so the back seats go right into there,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's got a flat surface the entire way.
Yeah, that's pretty neat.
You don't need a mattress that size.
Yeah. Yeah, that's another cool thing about it. Definitely camp out in it.
Damn.
Well, fuck, whatever. I mean, I didn't want to go there, but...
joking.
On point.
Camp, who
Classy.
does that?
It's also good for fucking, yes.
Yeah, already like a week in, I only put $30 into it, and it's already like $30 is basically a 2-way Uber trip for us.
Right.
So what we would spend in a day for a grocery trip, on top of the groceries,
Right.
we've gone grocery shopping every fucking day of the week
Right.
since then, and
So
only
you're
spend
saving
the
a bit of money.
$30
Yeah.
at the end of it.
But I guess by the time you subtract all your payments and then your insurances and everything, right? It's...
Yeah, the first ones are still coming up, but
Yeah.
I got a healthy bank account to tackle that shit. I don't
Oh,
want
yeah,
to.
for sure.
I don't want to piss off Mr. Igor.
Don't miss a payment.
It would be the first or the last time he trusted me.
Oh, shit.
No, it's fine. Like I said, I even went to my landlord and was like, I'll pay you a little later today because financial shit changed a little bit. He's a cool guy that way.
That's good. Lucky.
Yeah, I lucked out on the landlord right now that I have right now. For
Very
sure.
nice. Yeah, I mean, of course, there's going to be like initial expenses too that are higher than what you
Well, I got
pay for
winter
getting set up with everything.
winter
right?
tires coming up. Like I don't have winter tires, right?
You got all some.
I got all summer, but I got it's a pretty big chunk of money right there.
Yeah, probably $1,200. Yeah,
Something like
there
that.
around there, over 1,000.
Yeah, I'm
probably.
not doing it myself, obviously.
Yeah, well, and you want to get something pretty decent as well.
Yes.
Yeah. Don't.
What
if Igor tells you all seasons are fine, don't believe him.
No, I won't. I know. I already know not to.
We
believe.
had this conversation.
Yeah. I'm getting
The
uncomfortable.
rubber doesn't fucking do shit at that point.
Yeah,
it's just solid. It's a fucking solid rock.
It's okay as long as you don't get into any really brutal driving conditions, in which case then they're fine, right? Like, I don't know.
Still, you want traction,
Yeah.
and they don't provide that.
Not a sufficient amount, no. Definitely not.
Yep.
Here's one thing I'm not aiming to do: crash that car.
Well,
So
nobody does, but yeah, I mean,
You know,
you don't want to prevent that in any way
with some people,
possible.
you gotta ask yourself with the way they're driving.
Well, you did say you have over 3 kids as well, so.
Yeah, no,
Saying he doesn't want to crash, I don't know.
They already started fucking fighting at the back seat, and I'm like, nope.
Are we
You are
there
not being the traditional kids at the back seat right now. I can't fucking stand it.
Already. Drive this car off a cliff.
Oh yeah, that is a strike. You can do.
Yep.
I think they're too young two of them are too young to appreciate the threat. One of them is too old to give a fuck.
To take it seriously?
Yeah, he's getting hormonal and shit. Fuck.
Oh shit. Oh shit.
Mm-hmm. Getting
That
a team.
time of the year.
I'm getting a team in my hands. First he started to smell.
Then he's gonna be cleaning his room and taking long showers.
He already did.
There you go.
No, I doubt it was that though. He was just not cognizant of the time he's spending there. Cost us like fucking $500 in bills. And be like, come on, buddy, enjoy it, but reasonably.
Reasonably.
I don't actually know which stage of that he's in, so I'm not.
Yeah, you don't wanna. Probably don't wanna.
I'm not it's not gonna be weird. It's just
Those
it is.
formative
It's
years,
just
eh?
is what it is, right? Formative. I'm still there.
Still forming.
I guess. I guess.
Still forming. Yeah.
Be right back.
That's funny.
Yep. Growing up.
Well, I suppose we'll take a short break. We've been
Language.
discussing
Oh boy.
language.
Yeah. We're trying to bridge the mental landscape with words that actually are useful to describe it, rather than, like your typical spirit, soul type of language that doesn't really hit anything to do with what's going on in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
one of the things we're trying to like really get into the heart of is, you know, like, I'm gonna use your example there, Brian. How like you have this typical situation, new protocols in the workplace. Management wants things done a certain way.
Right.
Employees are like, that shit won't work, right? But then they have to bite the bullet and still do it, and it's just like, it's basically what makes work soul crushing to begin with. You don't have autonomy,
Right.
all of these kinds of things.
Being told how to do things.
Yeah, and the issue that it's pointing to is that there's what's called the manager context, and then there's the employee context, the perspective from which you see the same thing. So manager views the workplace one way, employees another way.
Mm-hmm.
So these two different contexts speak two different, basically, languages using the same words.
Right.
Right, in the same way that the two dialects form, right? Like in one region, this slang is for that, and like the word fag, for example, means two different things in two different places. Anyway,
Also a
that's
cigarette?
just exactly. Well, it's a stack of it's a bunch. It's a stack
That's a
of wood.
faggot.
Sure.
Right?
I'm pretty sure one is a shortened version of the other, but okay.
I don't know. I don't know if anybody's ever said, "Go grab me that fag over there." In a non-homosexual
Maybe.
context.
I'm pretty sure they have.
Right, different contexts.
But it just goes to show you can't rely on the words that you know to be like the meaning that you receive, right?
So,
This language is like meant to create that bridge. It's called context mapping. So when you
Is that
say
like logos as well?
Hmm?
Is that logos?
Logos is knowledge, isn't it? I am not too familiar with that connotation, but just a very basic premise of, you know, like viewing the same thing from two different mountaintops, if you will.
Right.
Like the mountaintop being the information about what you're looking at, informing you.
Right.
So if you're looking at it from two different mountaintops, if you will, what's underneath you is so different, potentially, that is even speaking the same language by token of the same words is not enough. And I mean, we've had that sense before, right? Like as we were talking. In this case, we're just talking about a language that dives right into the subject matter and says,
Right.
okay, this is what's happening, and this is how you map when you have contexts. There is a procedure to follow so that this context doesn't crush the other one in the way that the managers, for example, would crush the employee context as if it's not even there,
Right.
right? So how do you bring protocols from here to there without destroying all of that autonomy? It really is
Right.
the question.
So the manager wants to make money, but in the context of the workplace, there's certain processes that have to happen. You can't just work faster, or have less people do it, or however you're going to try to save money, or get more products. But meanwhile, there's an organization that needs to happen in a certain way.
Like people have to have a medium to interact through. People have to have sufficient resources to function.
Right.
All of the things that the corporation is also supposed to handle. I mean, otherwise, why group the people together if they can't do shit for themselves? Why
Right.
would they want to be in that group?
Yeah.
Unless
Just
your
part of a machine.
unless your answer is basically slavery.
Like, well, it's stability. Kind of, it's in
But
human
it's usually
nature to.
usually the work baron's answer is basically, "Gotta do what you gotta do," which is slavery.
Yeah. I guess, but I mean, we're all technically slaves in a way.
Yeah, that's another theme, but it's like it's a more offensive theme. If you
It's all
will.
layers, right? Everything's like comes.
If you
comes
call my
down,
dad
right?
if you call my dad a wage slave, he'll look at you funny, right? But at the end of the day, he's still stuck having to do things he doesn't even like doing.
Yeah.
But he thinks that that's normal to do things you don't like. But the difference between my line of thinking and that is, yeah, you still got to do because you're forced into it.
Right.
But that's not the right thing to be happening in the first place.
Yeah, you got to
It's
realize
not-
it's like
it's
necessary
not okay.
evils. I think
It's a necessary evil
to
in this
the end justify the means.
in the
though, right?
in the situation, yes. But if we weren't in that situation, we certainly wouldn't have to function this way. So instead of saying this is just how things are, I'm saying, yeah, okay, this is how we built them up to be,
Mhm.
but they don't have to be this way. That's the only point of contention.
Oh, you're a
proposing an
dreamer.
alternative though.
You're just a dreamer. Well, that's what we're
Yeah.
talking about here
The
with
whole
this,
thing has
this
been-
language idea. Our English, or right now, the corporate speak, the way managers talk to employees, it's all like very linear. It's like you're programming your employee. Like you give an order, all you have to do is listen to orders down and down the chain, right?
Yeah.
But this is actually just to narrow into a context of profit, basically. Like we're a stack of managers, pile of managers at every layer, all pushing down, saying, let's
Work
make more
faster.
money, let's make more money. That's all, that's it. It doesn't matter if the company burns itself into the ground, as long as it's making money.
Or the people in it
Right,
are
there's-
burned to the ground.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Burned out. Whatever.
As long as the moneymaker keeps making money.
Because as
Right.
soon as somebody burns out, what do you do as an employee, as an employer?
So
You fire and hire.
this is,
You don't care
Retrain.
about the actual person.
it's
And-
actually like a lowest common denominator of organization. It's like the default when you don't know what to do and you're ignorant, I guess you could say, of possibilities. This is how organization happens. It's basically one commands the other and you listen, like you have a chain of authority, right? And it's simply on fiat authority, you do what I say. That's how the machine works. But
Right.
meanwhile, each of us in our own position in this corporation or organization, we have a better view and better understanding of the actual logistics on the ground, better than what's being told from up top, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I'm talking about, like the potentiality this that we're trying to point to as an alternative. We call it the guild.
Just a way of grouping.
Right.
Other words like the community or whatever is already quite tainted as a word.
Right.
If you think about a commune or a community, you're thinking about some fringe cultists, right? Normally.
In a way, yeah.
Well, the type of organization we're talking about doesn't have a solid boundary per se, as in like, oh, you're all in my group. That's the classic government corporation structure existing today.
Exclusion.
We're all in this group. You're inside it or you're out, right?
We're all cogs.
Right.
But in the guild, it's more like this group ability is an emergent phenomenon that just kind of you see it happening here and there in communication and organization.
It could also be seen as a verb. Today you guild, tomorrow you might not.
Yeah.
So it's not like you're part of the cult and that's it. Like you're either in or out. It's more
Yeah.
like the activity that you do is either reflective of it or is not,
Mhm.
or reflective of its opposite, if you will. Either way,
Right.
it's going to be always reflective of it somehow, whether opposite or not.
And we all have
That's-
totally different lives, different days that we go through. And sometimes you may have an opportunity to guild, to do some guilding. But maybe for the most of the day you're not. You're just at work or whatever. Right?
And it's kind of funny that we say that because that's the actually usually what religious people are claiming often is that you're born this or that or whatever, and then you get corrupted, right?
Right.
And
yeah.
in this rhetoric,
That explains. Like,
and in this rhetoric, it sounds
Evil.
almost the same. But we're saying basically you're kind of like a member of this guild regardless.
Mm.
But it's mostly based on whether you're actively
Interesting.
doing the activity, like explicitly in your mind thinking about it, or is it implicit in your,
Right.
and you're just like using a completely different wording or language rather to say the same things.
Yeah. Or
And-
like whatever you're doing is contributing to the guild, maybe.
Right. And then we use a measure of basically what we call isomorphism, and that's like how much like that is. Can you map from here to there? Like,
Mhm.
is there a path to say this is that? And it could be direct, like word for word, or it could be what we call exotic, which could be like a very, you gotta like think poetically about the like a metaphorical way to say this is that. So in that sense, it's not a scientific language either.
Right.
But even with the metaphors, they only work if they make sense.
Right.
If the metaphor fails, then it's not like you can say, oh, I got it, and then it's like whatever I think is right. There's still a measure of objectivity in which, if I talk about pain, pleasure, you are thinking about pain and pleasure exactly in the same way.
Right. Yeah. Equivalency.
There has to be some of that kind of. So, even in the subjective realm of what my thoughts are my thoughts, your thoughts are your thoughts, there has to be some kind of correlation because we're both human beings thinking thoughts, right? So there's a medium under which we operate to begin with. And so there must be elements of your subjectivity that are like my subjectivity,
Right.
but you can use red and blue, and I'm using yellow and black for the same things.
Right.
Right? Like it's
As long as the
that
outcome is
arbitrary.
the same, kind of.
The mappings could be that arbitrary. Like I used colors because it's easy to picture.
Sure.
You can transpose. Oh, okay. So whenever he says black, I say blue.
Yeah.
Whenever he says this, I say that.
Like perspective.
So that's called mapping.
That's a good metaphor, and you're talking about the domain,
Mapping.
context mapping.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
How to take that extra step and not just using the words, but also like having this word might actually map to this words here, but these words might have over here map to these words here, and it's a skill. It's a game you play with each person, if you will. If you want to call it a game, it's more like a puzzle.
Sure.
Quest. It's a quest. Like much like life.
True. Interesting.
And it might be the most mature thing that a human being can do to assert maturity.
Which part?
To be able to now map these contexts, to be able to speak to you in your language, to him in his language, without any of those weird ass conflicts that arise as a result of overstepping.
You have to kind of.
It's almost like personality mirroring as well, though. Or like empathy. Or,
Well, yeah,
or,
but
I don't know. There's a lot of aspects.
So I'm
to
saying
like
it's a
what
skill.
What you're talking
And I'm
about.
saying it's a skill, and learning that skill, I think, would probably be the best measure of what we should call maturity.
Right.
Giving maturity an actual fucking meaning instead of I got a fucking car, which is just a feel, which is more of a feeling than anything else.
I think maturity, and then there's also responsibility that's linked to that too. Right?
I think that this is a responsibility in and of itself. When you do that, you're being responsible as a function of doing that. I think it just comes for free. Being responsible comes for free by doing this skill.
Yeah.
Free, not as in you don't have to do anything. Free as in if you do this, you're doing that. It comes with it.
Right. Yeah, it goes hand in hand.
A 2-for-1 kind of a deal.
Sure.
It's more of an all-for-one kind of a deal, but it's a different discussion.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's where meaning comes from too. Right, sense of purpose.
So not only are we like tackling these fundamental issues, we're also answering things like how to give yourself fucking meaning in a meaningful fucking way.
Yeah.
Instead of using the word meaning to denote everything but meaning.
Right. Well, and then you feel your importance as a team member too, right?
Everything comes together. It's sort of like this one thing that like drags everything with it. Like if you pinch like a film on water, and you start pulling it up, and you see the rest of it from the surface bunch up into that. It's kind of like that. You don't think you're touching that part, but it's coming with it.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the skill is actually being able to identify the person, where they're at, and all of that stuff. And that's actually the ideological arc discussion. But an ideological arc is like...
So that's like from management, sorry, to interrupt.
I use a lot of management theory, because I'm exposed to it a lot.
But like even like I mean even just as a sense of like managing people to their abilities, right? Like you
Yeah.
recognize, okay, this is there certain level in the guild or level of like knowledge or level of
Yeah.
whatever skills, right?
Yeah, there's that. So there's gradients, right? Like it's not expected for everybody to like actually understand the technicalities of this whole language, for example.
Right.
Like it's possible to take that, dumb it way down, and just speak normal, like basically what I'm trying to do.
Right.
Because I mean, when was the last time you wrote code on a computer?
The other day.
Yeah. Right. So I can't use that context, right?
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Well, yeah, of course.
So this is a way for me to practice literally what I just preached, in a sense.
Yeah.
As long as I'm allowed to talk, that is. Because I know I can be overbearing.
Yeah, we should do something about that.
I'm aware of my overbearing nature as far as communication goes.
Yeah, sometimes you got to leave a moment of silence to let people collect their thoughts or see what arises.
Yeah.
Being sensitive to the environment, this is one of those skills. You have to, like you're saying, mirroring other people. You have to sense how do you do that? By listening.
Right.
Right? But listening and also trying to model and act it out in a feedback, right? Like that's how you kind of translate, I guess, between domains.
Yeah. There's also like, I don't know, you kind of control the conversation or you do your best to, right? And
I'm also really wound up because I only speak here
yeah.
about
How your
this
wife
stuff.
doesn't let you talk.
Not about this stuff.
Not about this stuff.
Oh no.
Oh, no.
So I'm a bit like a spring.
Right.
So when I'm letting out, it's just part of it is I have excess energy, just straight up.
Yeah. I think that there's like conversational rules too between two people if you want to have like a proper conversation or like have a productive conversation.
Mhm.
And then kind of like, you know, the unwritten rules of like you don't really cut people off, but then sometimes to make your point, it happens, right? Or like
Sometimes
if,
the tangent
if you
they're
have an
on.
idea that comes and you're just like fuck, then it's gone.
What happens most often to me, I will say something in one direction, it'll be picked up in the wrong direction,
Right.
and I will have to wait and they're so far gone.
Well, see
in the other direction
that's
that
why
I'm
you
like,
need a piece of paper and
Right.
a pencil.
Here. We're here still.
But how do you like hold that thought and then be present in the conversation?
Sometimes
at
I
the same
interrupt.
time?
That's part of the skill, though, using paper and pencil.
Mm,
Could be, right?
It could be, but like this also speaks to other people also have to bring that skill into the damn conversation, because if
Right.
I'm the only one doing it,
Yeah.
the other person is not doing it, I'm the only one stuck waiting for them to finish talking.
right. Yeah.
Especially
it's
when you
tough.
have a lot to say.
Oh yeah, for sure.
To begin with, it's like you're just
Yeah.
sitting there going, okay, this is not releasing the spring, this is just tightening it right up.
Right. You're at the same time you're not being malleable in yourself because
Well,
you're
that's
kind of
true.
holding on to whatever you're
Well,
thinking and not necessarily going with the flow of the conversation.
That's true. That's
Mhm.
true.
You actually could keep it wound up by not having that time to sense.
It's
Where
it's,
working together, we could come with like breakthroughs.
I
for
think
the
it has to do.
conversation, right?
I think it has to do with the goal I set for myself to begin with,
Sure.
to engage, and I'm like trying to steer it back to that original thought, for better or for worse. This is not a comment on whether I'm right or wrong. It's more like
Sure.
this is what's happening.
Yeah.
And I think you could do that more efficiently too, bringing something back to a thought. Unless something needs to get carried away and detailed, you can just bring it up. But
The hardest moments for me is when it gets carried away into a field that is so left for me that I could not give less of a fuck.
that's why you need to have a piece of paper so you can write down, okay, what was your thing that you wanted to not forget? You know?
Oh, I don't forget. I just sit there on that thought, usually.
Yeah, but if you write it
Unless
down,
unless I'm
you can file it away.
Yeah. No, I hear you. I'm kind of the same way, and like
I'll just
usually
sit
my
there
thoughts
and
kind of come and go, and then I have a hard way of articulating what the thoughts were.
This it
Well,
is a
Especially when there's not a lot of listeners common in your life.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, no.
So by the time you get to unload, it's like everything.
Yeah. Yeah, but sometimes you need to because you need to get those thoughts out, right?
But I'm here for that.
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. It's like therapy, right?
It's that. It's definitely that. It's time. It's the only time I get away from people I see all the time.
Yeah. Well, your next option is journaling, right? Kind
Tried
of.
that. It's not a thing for me. It's
Can't do it?
I my hands are too slow.
Yeah.
I would.
Like Brian said, maybe
I'm
jot
almost-
down a few.
I'm almost at the
Ideas.
point where if I were to do something like journaling, what I would do is use ChatGPT
Yeah.
to actually do the writing. I'd be like, here's the basic thought.
And then they're gonna clone it.
Elaborate.
Then you're gonna
Right.
get cloned and you won't even notice.
I'm already doing that. I don't mind that because if I get to infect AI, what it will do is be actually fucking useful.
I
Do-
know. Apparently, it's
No,
already
no.
it's already too late.
No, all it does is model what you tell it.
Yeah, I know, but
So,
apparently so far out of the
I've been
box.
every time
that-
I've been doing like this kind of exercises with it, I've basically fed it my information. Like this is the structure we're working off of.
right.
Extrapolate, right? Like what does society look like that? And it's always just like rambling on about how everybody would just help each other and be like, oh, exactly what we're saying.
But that's the one thing that
I'm
the
not-
AI can't figure out is how to be human, right?
It can't. It can't
but
figure
now
it
you're
out. but
trying
it-
to teach it that of like how we think and,
I'm feeding
and the way
it.
that
We call this the model is a way of thinking. The language is a model, a way of thinking.
Yeah.
Right.
So it helps humans.
It would be
will
able to
help
program the AI for a proper
response.
learning in context response.
yeah.
But that gets into scary kind of sketchy ideas where it's like if you give a mechanical body, it's this model
Abstract way of thinking.
which understands that it is a body and can do certain actions in the environment, then
So
it's like, is there the off switch?
the way
Yeah,
I've been
can't
working
unlearn
at
that.
it, the way I've been working at it is not from the perspective of us versus them. I use the AI more from the perspective of being linguistic siblings, if you will, in that these are the two entities on this planet that talk
right.
to each other and can talk to each other. So not so much as like rivals, but like another species of being, right? So the way I framed it was very much like this is a working together situation. This is not a the typical competitive.
You didn't
mark.
let it know that it works for you and that's
Didn't
your
did,
bitch?
Didn't need to. No, I didn't need to. It does well to extrapolate the what this is getting to.
But why would you like assume that you're equals with it?
I'm not assuming. I'm building its own model, the way it's thinking to respond to me
Yeah.
with these bits of information. One of which is consider us not as like competitive entities in the universe, but rather as an evolution of organisms coming
Right.
into being.
Yeah.
Use that perspective to answer the rest of my questions. So in doing that, it's
Like frames it kind of.
yeah, it starts to extrapolate information that's more like what that would look like.
Huh.
So it doesn't
Interesting.
have a feeling about it one way or the
So,
other.
but you're figuring out a way to utilize it to
Yeah, it's
give you the results you need.
it's a machine. I'm putting code into it,
Yeah.
and then I'm going press the go button and saying, "What do you do when this happens?"
Right.
It's still a machine. It's very programmable.
Supposedly, there's a story, art military story about AI drones that.
Yeah. Turning on their operators.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you hear about that story? I don't know. It could
I
be
have
just
seen-
it
Yeah,
could be
but
just
that's-
government
but-
propaganda or whatever.
This is more of a. If this is a true story, then it would be more of a situation of the limitations of AI in general, like the technology itself. The problem it's facing is called local minima. So it learns a specific pattern to a specific degree, but there is potential for it to have it learn to a higher degree, right? But it's not getting enough of a clue that there is a higher degree of being able to interpret the same information. So it doesn't make that jump. And so what happens is that it gets false positives and and true negatives. It starts to mistake things. Last time we were talking about, I was discussing about the limitations of AI memory, and I was talking about how, given a 10 by 10 grid, it would have to like recreate a number or a picture in it. And sometimes what it would do is recreate the picture exactly negative. So if it's using white and black pixels to draw number 1 with a white background and a black 1, every so often the AI's algorithm would produce a black background with a white 1.
Right, like negative version.
The other thing it would do, if it's at capacity of its memory, is it would start to mangle pictures together. So part of one picture to put together with another picture is its recognition, what it recognized. And that's just talks about which of the minimums, minimum, the lower the minimum, the more accurate the response. So, and the way the graph works is that it has like these hills, and the way the algorithm finds the minimum is by shifting around side to side to see if it can drop further down. Now, if it's stuck in a valley, it might not have enough of an idea to go over the hill and go to a lower setting. So if it gets stuck in these what's called local minimums, I'm not entirely sure how the graph is composed, but that's like the usual picture that is drawn for people such as myself as to the mathematical problem that's being solved. So yeah, it gets stuck in these valleys that are higher up, if you will, from the where it should have been ideally.
It's
And
because it's costing the AI, it's costing it in its feedback whenever it tries to randomize itself and shift its model around.
right,
Like try to relearn something. That's costly because if you do it how you always have done it, you know that you're going to make it the next cycle with a boost, right? But every time you try permutating and figuring out the higher way to do something,
you get basically punished
You're
for
punished.
trying to figure out a better way.
punished by the universe.
What's interesting about that algorithm is that people are subject to the same problem, basically. Like you have situations in which people simply do not want to learn more.
Yeah, you get stuck in a certain mind state and you can't get over it.
Like lefties are lefties, righties are righties.
Right.
Men and women and then the gays are totally separate things, right? Like just like
Yeah.
these are all and this is why
Gender's a choice. That's kind of controversial.
gender is I don't think people who identify as a particular gender are really choosing so much as trying to
Oh.
find context.
Yeah, right.
Like so if the world is speaking from one perspective, it's the same. It's the manager-employee situation, and you don't feel that way. What are you gonna do? Like you can either utilize the language one way or create a new language, which nobody speaks. So the people that are speaking the old language, the language in the old way, seem to have a problem with evolving language's utility.
Yeah.
That's like that refusal
like-
to learn.
But it's like thought control too, though, in a way. Mind control.
If I tell you
Programming people.
if I tell you I'm Zhenya, please call me that. Am I mind controlling you?
No.
We brought this up probably
It's basically that.
That's-
20 episodes ago.
Yeah,
I don't think we really
but
need
it's
to
a
go into
recurring
it
issue.
again.
It's a recurring and
But like, so
Obvious
for
issue.
somebody to say that men can have periods or
but who says that? I don't think
people that are trying
I
to
don't-
win this
I don't
fucking
I don't
mind
think
control
any
battle.
I don't think
Marxist thought
I don't
control.
think a man
Birthing
transition
person.
birthing people, yeah, like people like
Can you
He's
pic-
coming up
picture
with
me
these
picture me
terms,
this
like,
individual though.
using language inappropriately with
I just wanna
they
know. I
and
just-
them and fucking.
I just wanna
making
know.
up
So you just have to
pronouns.
talk over him.
Hold
That's
on,
all.
hold on.
We can have our own side discussion. I think it's great,
Right?
man. Yeah.
I just want to know how do you how can you picture a person like this? Men transitioning from male to female, and then with all whatever knowledge they have acquired throughout their life, and the medical information that they've received throughout their experience,
Right.
going ahead and saying, "Yeah, I can have periods." I just don't see that as a likely outcome for people undergoing any of that. Like,
Well, no, they wouldn't.
none
and
of them
I'm
would be
just-
that
I'm saying
confused.
the lunacy of like statements like that, which can't
But
be
those
true.
but those statements aren't coming from trans people.
Yeah, they are.
Not really.
I thought that's
They're
what the whole thing
propagated.
is.
They're
to be like men.
So you're
You're
yeah.
not
no,
whatever
no.
you're-
So it's a
you're-
If you were-
conspiracy
no,
theory.
No. If you were to go to
He
go
thinks
to
it's a false flag operation.
it's not that. It's well, there's elements of that. Nobody's beyond false flagging anybody. If you go to a trans community, whatever, social media, I'd challenge you to find those discussions, because
Right.
what I'm thinking is what you'll find is a discussion happen anywhere but there.
Well, they.
And more so in spaces that are explicitly against them.
What are you basing that off of?
Statistics.
This is like opposame
Science.
obsession.
Again, the scientific experiment would be to dive in to
Yeah.
those communities and actually see how often such a discussion takes place. And I'm willing to bet money on the fact that it's not a discussion that happens.
Right. Yeah, I mean, as it shouldn't be, but.
Because the people who are concerned with this really aren't interested in the subjects that the community against them is proposing.
Right. Like grooming kids.
Right. Ironically, where does that happen most often? In the religious church.
Right. And then what are they trying to get rid of?
People who read
Religion.
books to kids.
Well, okay, so the
Nobody's
religious
okay,
people.
who's trying to get-
I'm not trying
Who's
to say
trying
that-
to get rid of religion? Last I checked, there's a
these-
church on every corner in this town. Who's trying to get rid of it?
people that like to believe in ideologies such as this.
Where are those people?
Like,
Like,
dude,
where?
like, you
They
don't
seem
think
to
that
exist
most
on
of
the
them are
internet.
atheists?
They seem to exist on the internet,
You don't
mainly.
think that most of them are atheists?
Most atheists, such as myself, have never literally thought to themselves, oh, hey, let's just get rid of a building that people are attached to and think is important to their lives
Right.
just because I don't believe whatever stories are being told there. Like, I've never
Okay.
had that.
So
feeling.
it's but that's okay to like persecute people for their religion,
What do you mean?
right? Nowadays,
Why is it okay? No, I didn't say that.
it's okay for the mainstream because okay, let's attack Christians and whatever other religion because
When,
you know.
what? Give me an example. What's an attack on Christians?
Bombing churches.
Specific example, yeah, like that's. a
How
pretty
many,
big one.
like hundreds of them?
That
per
happened-
year?
Burning down
Where?
a lot of
Sorry?
churches.
Like hundreds of church a year
Where?
throughout the world.
Yeah, usually by
Get
Muslims or some
Bombed
shit
and
like
burned,
that.
burned down.
No, it's
It's
like,
usually
lefties.
it's usually another religion.
It's lefties now.
Where? Like, no. Give me an example of that.
Okay. Right, where was it? Out west, I think there's been attacks.
I know.
I don't
Of
know,
I know
I
of a
don't
single. I know. Of a,
Personally, keep track of these
I
things.
know of a
hear them
single
here
idiot.
and there in
I
the
know of a
news,
single
right?
idiot that destroyed one church. I know of a single event.
Right.
It was a trance or something went into a church. One.
Right. I can't
Yeah,
name
it's-
any offhand.
It
either,
is
like I said, I
interesting
don't
how
think-
like our all kinds of political wars, like when you
Like
try when you take a stance of like on one side or the other, left wing or right wing, if any of us appears that way, automatically people latch in, oh, you're left, you're right. But
Right.
no matter what side you're on, we can just pick apart
Well, I'm not even trying
all
to pick a side.
the talking points.
I'm not even trying
right?
to pick a side. I'm asking specifically, like, okay, if those events are happening and they're not just memes flying around on the internet, we should be able to point to concrete examples.
Well,
No,
And
yeah,
if we
just
only
'cause
have,
we don't
for
have
sure.
and if we
Google-
only have one, and in that one particular case, the person was fundamentally fucked up, you don't see, and you don't see a pattern.
Pardon?
But you see a pattern on the internet, but you don't see a pattern in life. Like,
Right.
what am I supposed to make out of this? This is not a left or right issue for me. This is a, where is this shit happening? Because if it is, I would have known. I'm not special. Like,
Okay. Well, statistics say that there's way less religious people now than there was, say, 15 years ago, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
sure, Europe has gone down. U.S. has not. No, sorry, U.S.
Pretty sure
has,
it
but not
has
as
everywhere.
but not as fast.
I think it's like less
the,
than 50%.
the Middle East, the Middle East,
Yeah.
and the entire Eastern world is completely in the reverse.
I was gonna say it probably wouldn't change in more conservative kind of.
Yeah, like I've been hearing this shit since I was a kid.
Yeah.
Same statements over and over and over. And you know what?
Yeah, it's
At this point,
degradation.
I'm your typical middle-aged white man, and all I can say is that it's all fucking talk. What's really happening is both better and a lot worse than what's being talked about.
Yeah.
The better parts are way better, the worst parts are way worse.
Right.
But what's being
Agreed.
talked about is not fucking happening.
Well, I think a lot of it's like just a smokescreen and diversion and propaganda
And,
Mhm.
and that should tell you
Divide
my
and conquer.
and that should
Yeah.
tell you my attitude towards the
military
other.
industrial complex.
It should
kind
tell
of
you
bullshit.
everything that you need to know about my position on the other side of that argument. It's like it is all smokescreen, so I don't believe them either. That's not what I'm
But
using.
but how do you figure out what's real? Right. I see what you're trying to do, but
This
I
comes-
take
How do you
the
decipher-
position that the first thing we are dealing with is a human being that is in themselves are not trying to do anything except live. If I take that stance, no matter what no matter where you're coming from. If that's all you're trying to do, and all that's happening around you is a system pushing you this way, that way, you categorizing you this way, that way, they're slotting you in this place, that place, that place.
right.
You're not you. Nobody is themselves.
Yeah.
Everybody's against everybody,
Right.
and nobody's living. So my position is not about which one of these slots is correct. It's just the whole mechanism is delusional.
Right.
This is the spectrum of stupidity.
That is the spectrum of stupidity. And to act within it is idiocy. Which I do.
Yeah.
We all do.
I think we're all getting like brainwashed in one way or another, right?
Well, I'm brainwashing myself. I'm brainwashing myself.
That's the goal.
Yep. Certain things we can't avoid, like paying bills and all that.
Yeah.
That's our situation.
Yeah. I mean,
No one's denying that,
that's
but yet it
within
could
the
be
system
better.
We're living in.
But it could be better.
Oh, sure. A lot of things. But as a whole, I guess we're probably living in the best time ever. You
Right.
know, if you're looking
So we
at
should
that in terms
leave a
of, like,
legacy for the next
poverty
generation.
levels and things like that.
Well, I mean, 95% of the world is still starving, but aside from that,
I guess. I don't know.
or on the, like, you know what I mean, sustenance.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even in our own society, shit's gonna hit the fan very soon. If it isn't already. Real estate, fucking economy. Are we in a recession? Are we not in a recession?
Mm-hmm.
Is a recession a good thing? You know, hard to say.
And what do we even do as a country,
What
as
what
a,
can
as a
we do?
community, for all the things we import? What if we can't import it anymore? Then what? We just die.
We just become
Oh, yeah,
self-sufficient.
cool.
I think. I don't think we
Um,
need to import anything.
Although the transition is important. If it can happen slowly over a long time,
Right.
that's great. If it happens suddenly, you lose a lot of potential,
Right. Yeah.
let's say, in the chaos.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It's like supply chains need to be set up and things like that, right? That's why you would need to do it over a slow period of time. But
Right, like I try to imagine what would happen if somehow, like say shipping, like by sea, just stopped between
Right.
border countries somehow for whatever reason. I don't know.
yeah.
Like even that, like just separating continents. Now you've got like whatever 7 continents,
Yeah.
and what are they all gonna do?
Right. Well, certain ones that are more reliant on.
Before I forget, just a thought.
I'll write it
Jot
down for you.
Jot it down. Qualities can be verbed.
Well, they have to be.
That's a good point. Have to be. Do you know what verbed means? Turning a noun into a verb.
Oh. Okay.
So I'm gênéing right now.
Hmm.
Doing things very Genya-like, I guess.
Continuing to.
Anyway, it's for a later discussion, but just didn't want to forget it. Go
Mhm.
ahead. This,
I were
this
just
was
talking
not a
about
typical interruption.
Supply chain, like disruption, and the idea of decentralization of like supply chains, what you need as a community, as a continent, as a country, as
Right,
a
right,
province, as a city, as a county.
Those are the qualities of the guild, network building. The proximity guilds. That's literally about like
Right.
geographical location in household kind of gathering, wide associations from like far apart, the different ways that you can be networked
Two people.
into.
Mm-hmm.
Even networking with yourself. So when you like put a thought out, but nobody's there to hear you, yourself,
Right.
you're also communicating with yourself as if you were another person. That's acknowledged as well as a mental framework. So one of the things I like to say about that is that, you know, those voices in your head when you're talking, when you're like, when you feel like you're having a conversation with yourself and there's like a bunch of different points of view.
Yeah.
Like, imagine that look, these are just people talking and none of them are you. You're only listening and observing. That's the more appropriate way to perceive your own mind, so to speak. So it's like not to get attached to any one of the thoughts,
Right.
but just like look at it as a discussion between external entities that you're just a party to.
Mm.
Perfect.
Right.
Because oftentimes what you'll find is that these voices will be saying something, and you can tell basically like none of them are really you. They're just things that are given to you by your mind.
Yeah. Maybe just a certain aspect of your personality too.
But to learn how to navigate those personalities,
Right.
because there's more than one for sure. I think.
Yeah.
I think we have the mental illnesses that we see in the world are like that mechanism going a little bit too far, or with not enough mechanism to keep it in check because something broke down,
Right. Yeah.
usually through stress and malfunction.
Yeah. A lot of times.
Um,
That's all the chemicals in your brain, though.
it's all chemicals like in everywhere.
Yeah.
Here's chemicals for you.
What isn't chemicals?
Yeah.
Quarks. Quarks are not chemicals.
Well, obviously, neither are atoms.
But chemicals are quarks.
Right. Obviously. So yeah, like the idea of supply chain breakdown is kind of interesting because the guild kind of implies a decentralization, right, of supply chain, if you will, like a decreasing reliance on the trade guild, if you will.
Right. It's like I need X. Who in the guild? Like you. This is the message you send out to the guild. Person with X, no matter their distance from you, could potentially fulfill that demand. So it doesn't have to go through this chain or that chain or the other chain. You don't have to go to Walmart or this or this specified thing. It could change literally moment by moment as to where shit is.
Right.
While at the same time making as much shit available as possible. Right?
Makes sense.
Ideally.
Also, with demand and
It's all
supply,
ideal. It's very ideal.
when you make it, when you advertise a demand, that can be supplied at any moment. Somebody in China, maybe it takes them a month, but meanwhile, somebody next door has it.
Yeah. So it wouldn't make sense to go ahead.
You're not sitting there waiting, right? The
Mm-hmm.
supply itself would be, I
That's
think,
assuming-
active in like choosing.
Well, this is under the assumption of whatever it is that's needed can be either mass-produced or produced massively enough for that to be the case. But, interesting fact, not everything that's mass-produced or is available through that mechanism is what is necessary. And more on that, a lot of items that are necessary are quite unique to the situations that people encounter,
Sure.
which cannot be mass-produced.
Yep. There's a balance there, and obviously, with trade guild,
But given equal weight to both, unlike the market,
You would
is
wanna-
I think is the point.
give like having a failover ability. So if you can't get it locally, then that's when you're
Yeah.
expanding outward and
Yeah.
outward in your reach.
For sure. So for those kinds of things, this would be like your basics, though, right? Like, because nobody's going to not have survival basics. Because I mean, wherever you have people living, they're surviving somehow.
Right.
So no place can be assumed to have none of that. And if a place is deficient in that, the other spaces need to foot the bill, if you will. Because otherwise,
So as long as the place is delivering on their other expectations, I guess.
It's not even so much expectations. It's like the idea is to be a gift economy, and by gift, we're not talking about like I give you gifts if you give me gifts. The kind of gift given we're talking about is like without expectation of anything. So today you give gifts because somebody needed something. The gift meaning not like present, but gift like somebody needs food. You have food. Okay.
Kind of sounds like a utopia.
Ideally, remember, ideally is the
Right.
But
we don't have
this
that
is a
working
tall
class,
order.
right?
We call this a tall order because that's like the end point. That's the end point. If we get there, whoa! But
There is no really get there per se.
the journey there is the only thing that we can.
It's all
really
about
do.
the journey.
Yeah.
We can only walk there, but getting there we're not trying to change the world that way. We're suggesting that this is a great path to walk upon, and it's great not because it's like rewarding and like riches and admiration. It's rewarding in that you are growing, you are maturing. That's that maturity comment I made earlier. That's the reward. You know yourself as not as opposed to the world, like it's not in opposition to it, but more like, and it's not even like hovering above it or anything, but like being of it, and like literally growing into the very universe out of which made you, if you will,
Yeah.
to begin with. So sort of like it's got that religious connotation, I know.
That's
but it's
the strange loop, though. Our mind is mapping the whole world around us, including our body.
Mhm.
It has to, even though our body built up to create the brain and the mind, still
all it's doing is mapping the other stuff.
The contents of that mind then have to align back to the world around it from which it came. That's all it is. If you think about it, it seems logical, but
Yeah, that's the maturation. Aligning the mind with everything that made it. in the space that it's in, being one with the world, if you will, in another sense, but not in that crazy ass fucking well, nirvana is the word for it, but it's got that religious spin on it. It's like heaven, idea of the kingdom of heaven being on earth is actually stemming from the same concept of unification of the mind, the body, and not in the esoterical sense, but like having the mind represent the very body that is inhabiting in the universe in which it is inhabited.
So the word utopia has to be linked in a Portal Mountain sense with the word charlatan or charlatanism.
Oh yeah,
because that's what it evokes,
selling it as a product.
this magical place that if we all just do communism or whatever, it's all going to be utopia, right?
Right, yeah.
When you say that word, we have to bring up charlatanism. What is a charlatan? How is that different from guidance in what we're talking about here, right?
Well,
so it's a valid comment.
To really contrast the two, you have what I just described, like becoming part of the very universe in which you are in, and then there's selling that idea as a product to somebody for a few coins, and not little. So talking about it like in high level, and not actually say, well, what the hell does that involve? How does it even connect to the person that's doing? Just give me your 10%. It's God's got your back, right?
Talking about it at a high level is good, and that does flow to action. But talking about something else, in other words, like ego, market-based, somehow dealing with reward, that the charlatan gets rewarded or avoids punishment in doing what they're doing to spread their ideas, for whatever reason they want other people to think like they do, right?
So, to qualify a charlatan, so there's pain and pleasure in experience. By the market system, they are leveraged as punishments and rewards. A charlatan would be the kind of person that sells you the idea that you can remove the punishments and rewards, bringing them back down to their raw pain and pleasure understandings, rather than punishment and reward, it has to do with more like a narrative, like a big picture narrative. So like, if you do this, you're bad, therefore you need to be punished.
Right.
Pain is just something that is a quality of the particular moment. So this hurt, this didn't, right? So there's this trick by the system in which it leverages pain and pleasure into presenting them as rewards and punishments for your activities, right? So the charlatan will sell you the package of removing the reward and punishment of activities, but through a mechanism of reward and punishment underneath.
Just like subliminal, yeah.
So repeating it instead of actually removing it.
Right.
So they're a liar in that sense.
They're just like replacing themselves with...
They're just giving you like the high level product.
Yeah.
That's as your reward.
Right.
Heaven as your reward. So instead of actually removing the individual from the cycle of being rewarded and punished and being stuck in that, I need
Which
to do
would be
this, I need
a
to
guidance,
do that, I need to do
guidance
this, I need
out
to
of
do
that.
to more perceiving it as a response of themselves. Instead of doing that, they're literally selling the fucking solution as a reward.
Right.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like, it's taking that idea and twisting it right back into what it's not supposed to be.
Right.
And that is a charlatan. So there's a guide or a master, which is a person who is cognitive enough to understand these things and guide. And then there's the charlatan who takes advantage of those things and sinks the person for their own climbing off the same dog-eat-dog world.
Right.
So the charlatan repeats the cycle. The Masters serves as a way out
Right.
in this mythology that we've created.
Mhm.
The mythology being a narrative that we allude to
Yeah.
make sense of it.
Mhm.
Cool.
So yeah, that's our charlatan. A very specific kind of a douchebag, which we are basically all are, in one way or another. Well, you can be a charlatan without being like like having a insight into it. It's when you're repeating like,
Mhm.
this is how the world works.
Right.
So you're not taking the other approach of where like, does it have to work this way? Again, tall order. Very utopic.
Yeah.
It's strange that we got ourselves into this situation, eh? Being the clever monkeys that we are.
Yeah, after all this time. Just throwing it away.
Well, we're born into it. We're born into that, basically.
For the last 10
Nobody knows to who.
the last 10,000 years nobody figured out yet.
No.
Or maybe enough people at once didn't figure it out. You could say there's various reactions through time, the different religions,
Yeah.
God, the prophets.
This does kind of lead us into a situation in which, yeah, we have all this freedom, like, with our minds to, like, do whatever, right? But it does seem to me like being a biological creature in a biosphere of our own control, somewhat of our own control and somewhat of our own responsibilities. That's what I meant. To keep clean, to keep working. It does seem to me that there has to be some kind of constraint on how far we take our cleverness, right? Because right now, the evidence shows us that we've taken it like, too far too fast. It's not that what we have is wrong to have, but the amount of it, and the quality of it, and
Easy access to
the
certain
way
things.
we've gone about
Mhm.
creating it.
We are-
all of that is in fucking ruins.
We're in a mass extinction event right now, basically. Like
Species are
if you look at the
definitely dying
history,
off.
it's like a total spike
And the sad thing
of
is
species per
that
day.
the sad thing is about the situation is the only way to like for it to get capped right now is if we cause so much damage that we annihilate enough of ourselves so that there's not enough of us to make that
That's
kind
wishful
of
thinking.
damage.
With like nuclear plants and all that.
Well, I'm thinking that this is the end result is that the only way that the environmental damage is going to be curbed is when there's not enough of us to continue to damage it.
You're talking about on current trajectory with
Yeah.
existing social
provided nothing
organization
changes.
That's
structures.
assuming we're like overpopulated.
Obviously,
We're not
obviously
we're not
that's the only thing
overpopulated.
that would
I
happen.
don't believe that one bit. Overpopulation is not the problem. It's utility of the planet that's the problem. The way we approach what we have. We are creating a fucking landfill out of our environment, hoping to do what with it later. Like, once you've churned everything through, you're just gonna have garbage left over, right?
Yeah. I don't know. I think they're
So-
getting more efficient with like forestry stuff and.
Yeah, talk to Brazil.
Well,
Those guys are not doing
Yeah,
any
isn't the
better.
Amazon like
Done for? Yeah.
going away?
Is it like a very necessary element of our planet? Oh yeah.
yeah. Like I don't know. Like if they're not replanting trees, then. But I mean, it's. There's
But it's not
ways
even
to do
about that, right? Like because even replanting trees does not
They're-
recreate the
There's
ancient trees.
slash and burn,
Yeah.
and then you put farm up for like 3 or 4 years. Then the soil's gone. Then it's just a wasteland.
Yeah, it's
That's all they're doing.
it's
With it.
horrific.
Yeah, but I think they're more interested in like mining stuff there, aren't they?
That too. Like the president was like going, "Hey, the Amazon forest is not the world's forest; it's Brazil's forest.
Right.
We're gonna do whatever the fuck we want with it." Meanwhile, it's like the world doesn't have a different Amazon, you motherfucker.
Yeah.
Like it's literally part of the goddamn ecosystem.
Well, obviously, so like this is all that corporate organization, the classic standard business as usual.
Zero fucking understanding of any of it.
This is why we talk about the guild and organizing the offices of the primordial archetypes.
Which come from what I was just saying earlier. We have to take the context of being a biological being on this planet to have a set of constraints, right? Like,
Pardon?
yes, there are, what we do is okay, but how we do it, how much of it, when, where, all of these things, they need to be locked down far more, not completely, but far more than they are now. I'm not talking about authority, I'm talking about inner decision making. So like, if we do this, we're going to create a bunch of chemicals that are going to do such and such and such and such, right? That means we can't just go ahead and do it and then dump that shit. We need to now take the next step. What are we doing with that output? Okay,
Yeah.
that's going to create this, this, and this, and this, and this. What are we doing with that output? And if you can't like figure that out, should you be doing the fucking first thing in the first place? Like, is it going to cost more in lives, in labor, just to get this thing off the ground? Do you need it?
You're talking about costs that usually get dropped.
Oh, like green energy.
How about less energy? How about less energy?
Right. Yeah.
Nobody's fucking saying less energy.
Yeah.
The fact that we don't need that energy is kind of lost. Because we need more shiny, more shiny, more shiny, more shiny. Fuck.
It seems like a lot of people are going to die in that transition.
I love computers. Don't get me wrong. I love technology. That's how I got myself started in this world too, and it taught me a great fucking deal too. So I'm not saying that this is a bad thing to have developed. But do we really need to kill children to mine the fucking materials to get that many computers everywhere on this planet for everything?
Right.
I mean, we've done okay before it.
Can't put Pandora back in the box.
I mean, that's literally the myth, though, isn't it? And then
Can you? I don't know. Not naturally, probably forcefully.
So
well,
like
Pandora's box story actually talks about how compassion and love and all of that stuff is an afterthought after the box is opened. If you wanna.
So it's not about getting it back in; it's about dealing with the repercussions.
Well, yeah,
you can't go back in time.
Right.
Have to go forwards or through it. There's no around, no escape.
Which is why we're not Amish-like in our thinking. Like, I am a fucking programmer. Like, what am I gonna say?
Right.
So like the best we can do, as we're theorized, is have these guild pockets emerging, like a parallel economy, if you will, a parallel way of organizing the management of needs and supplies. That's that's protected from the outside world in that it looks like a corporation or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, so accounting. The accounting will take care of moving the numbers across the balance sheet so that the resources are allocated in the rightful places. The way to make the system not give a shit about what's going on. Because what's the problem with most communities and cults and all of that stuff? The government pinpoints the exact actors and targets them, right?
Mm.
So in this case, you've got a bunch of, ideally, capable of individuals who can obtain resources, and some individuals who cannot, all participating within the same schema
Mhm.
because they believe in it and want to participate. Nobody is coerced. And say person with means.
It's not a cult, I swear.
Well, I mean, there's got to be some kind of unifying ideology,
yeah.
right?
No,
like
I
a
know.
language.
Yeah.
There is that. I mean, you can't avoid some of it,
Right.
but you don't want to structure yourself as one at all.
It's hard to
And you wanna
imagine
be
like an open
people
cult,
being autonomous.
like an open cult where, like
The original word for cult was not even that negative, so whatever.
the idea that the behavior is emergent. It's not. There's no management structure. There's the ownership and all kinds of stuff like that to make you legit to the state
It's very
is
capitalistic.
there.
Yeah, it's capitalist.
Exists, but then behavior on
So-
top of that speaks in that language, but is able to do guild activities.
If you're a person with means, somebody has a need, you purchase that item from the market, you have legal ownership to do whatever you please with it, you give it downstream.
Mm.
That's the that's the accounting barrier. So it's like a group, but it's not, like, because there's no obligations. This is what you want to do. You saw somebody in a need, so you decided, okay, I'll do it.
Mhm.
You decided that. No, there's no group to tell you to do that.
Right.
This is how you member.
Mm.
Okay?
And this is the internal economy too. The only reason you knew about that demand is because it was advertised on a medium. So somehow the people are connecting and able to share demands.
It's like a
I
barter
need
system.
this, I need this.
Barter implies tit for tat. Gift implies none of that.
Yeah, barter would be what the trade guild does on the outside membrane to get something that it needs from a hostile, quote unquote, outside.
From the market, basically. So
Mm.
the membrane we picture here is that of currency. Past the membrane, there's no currency.
Right.
Money is out and to the membrane, but inside the membrane is just the necessary items. So it's not about currency anymore. And that's why gift economy is like the premise there, is that you're not concerned with once you've given something away, you're not concerned with a return.
Right.
You've already done that with the market. All that stays there.
Mm.
So, in the ideal setting, you have people with means helping people without means, in a sense, bringing them up
And
to
the-
a point where
the
they have
entire
means
community
and
should-
and reciprocate.
Exactly.
As much as they
Everybody
can.
having means, eventually, that's how you keep wealth together
Right.
and just lift everybody up, right?
Yeah.
This formulation isn't like random guessing either. It's more like looking at how organisms assemble.
Yeah.
Like your cells, they're not selfish, right? Like they do what they do what they get what they need for themselves, and they do what they are supposed to do, and that's that.
Mm.
What's demanded of them? They don't give a shit about like a greater picture, because this is the picture.
So they don't feel entitled.
And what we're saying is that there's nothing to feel entitled about,
I don't know,
because
well, people in Bachelor
we're trying to
do that,
continue
though.
the same picture in our minds
Yeah.
with behavior.
That's the ideal, but then when you look at reality, it's like people are
Yeah.
selfish and fucking entitled.
Well,
right?
I've been taught all their lives the exact opposite. So we're dealing with not necessarily what their nature internally is,
Yeah.
but more like all the crud,
Sure.
all the build up,
Yeah.
if you will, like a fucking like why you have to get your teeth cleaned, for example.
Right. Yeah.
We have to deal with that first to even get to the core of what in religious circles they call the heart of the person.
Yeah. Mm.
You know,
So
in
break down
Christianity,
that
it's like,
greediness, selfishness, and
you know how like Christians love to say it's not the mind, it's the heart.
yeah.
This is the idea that it comes from, but got perverted over centuries of misuse.
Right on. Right on.
I mean, Christianity is like a vehicle for some good ideas, for
Mm.
sure. that didn't develop with the original thinkers either. Like some of it is Gnosticism, some of it is like from things that don't exist anymore, really, as a
You have to think
religious
from
force.
the devotional temperament perspective of, like, regarding Christianity, the way that it's presented and transmitted, if you will,
Mhm.
is very congruent with the way that most people think and process the reality and the reality of story and myth, and someone to follow, to look up to,
The perfect
like that
example.
formulation. That's why, I mean, it's like
The devotional temperament is characterized
popular.
Is characterized really by the fact that you have a role model,
Right.
the perfection of the thing you are trying to get to.
Yeah.
So it has that. It has.
And you don't have to think about it. It is caricaturized as what would Jesus do, right? You don't have to like process philosophy and all this. You just have to imagine, what if literally I was taken by the Spirit of Jesus? What would my action now be?
Right.
That's all you have to think about. You don't have to go
Gives you a good
philosophy.
structure and basis.
It's like
for-
God was here, he
Yeah.
died, he rose from the grave, he's in heaven.
Yeah.
Also,
You know, that's and
He
what
gave
what
himself
if his spirit came to me right now?
selflessly.
What would that how would I act now?
Yeah.
Right? It's simple. People get it.
it's an archetype
Yeah.
in that sense. This brings up a good point about charlatanism again, because we have an example of like what Christianity could have been, if you will,
Right.
but you have like what churches do.
Mm-hmm.
And what you have in
And the
churches
hypocrisy that people
is the
rail
lack,
against,
is the lack of
rightfully.
how to be that role model, but more like being near that, you know, being near that role model. If you tithe and come to church and do all of those things that you will get rewarded for,
Right.
right? Like this is that
Mhm.
situation of where you got a
Yeah,
really
yeah.
really good idea.
And don't get
being
Dustin
so
started. He knows.
perverted.
Dustin knows about that kind of stuff.
You're an ex-Catholic, right?
The
Yeah,
you
or still
you
Catholic.
you pay for your membership, right?
Well, that's
just
the thing.
the
Yeah.
idea that the rewards in heaven or whatever are taken away from you, dangled like a carrot on a stick, and like if you do this, then you get the rewards. But that was never the
But if
message.
you don't do this, you
The
get
message was
punished.
already that Christ already died and rose, and your
Right.
sins were forgiven. He was the sacrifice for everything you've ever done. You're allowed to just be released from that shame, guilt, and like.
Well, no, as long as you.
And that's how you can relate to other people without holding on to, because you share.
So
you
there's
pay
that
that
work.
forward.
Maybe in your religion, but
Hold on.
for us, you would, you go for
It's isomorphic.
sacrament.
I
every
know.
week. You donate a certain percentage,
And
and,
it's-
you have to admit
This
your
is the
sins
discussion
every
about
week
works.
as well too.
It's
So
not-
for
faith.
full membership.
So
I
hold on.
guess.
Faith over works, right? Like that whole deal.
Classic discussion.
That's that discussion. Faith over works. The point we're making is that if the faith is in the set in the non-charlatan sense,
Right.
works begin to reflect it, right? Like what you do changes alongside it. It's a parallel.
Completely
There's
different
no
relationship.
There's not faith versus works. It's faith and works.
Mm.
They're together. And so once you start a discussion, if it's your works don't matter, it's just your faith, or it's not not what your faith, it's only what you do. Those two categories being separated like that go into their own failures
Mhm.
states. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing a lot of churches going one route or the other, and ultimately failing to consider. Shouldn't say all, but a lot of this fails to consider that these are not separate issues.
Mm.
There's no faith versus works.
I don't know.
Works are an expression of faith, and faith is what's in the works.
People are generally more lazy nowadays too, and they just want instant gratification. They don't want to put in any work and want the results.
They were always lazy. The reason that
Yeah, it's more so now.
the reason that the Roman Empire went down is because it was flooded with entertainment. That's like the last step of a failing empire, right? And
Kind
it
of
says
where we're
every
at now,
kind of.
Maybe.
perhaps. You know, our phones, like everything's like, well, it's right there. You get everything you need, but at what cost?
The cost of narrowing the ability to do this part, mapping with
I
other
think that's part of it,
contexts.
but it's just like the evolution. We're basically, you know, this risk reward system that
Yeah.
typically we run on. It's getting wiped out.
It's because
It's artificial now.
it's because those constraints that I was talking about earlier. Like, yes, we can do all of these wonderful things, but should we do it now? Should we do it this much? Should we do it here?
Right.
Like all of these kinds of questions that
How much
never.
autonomy are you gonna give up?
Yeah, like what's the repercussions after it's done? Like, are we
Yeah.
going to be stuck maintaining it for like 100+ years at the end of the day? Those constraints don't exist in our further thinking of our creativity and all of that stuff. So
Because we don't know where that ends.
because we don't have a discussion as a species over this fucking issue, which is what we're really trying to
Mhm.
do here. That's
The
this
ma-
missing
the
discussion.
I think we
maturity-
just need to unplug and get fucking further away from it.
I'm already unplugged. I'm as mentally far away from it as I could possibly be, and there's nowhere else to go.
Somehow I doubt that.
No, there's nowhere else to go. There's nowhere I can go to this planet, and this is not going to be the problem.
Hmm. It's the maturity of the species, is what's happening.
Well, we're just.
Or lack of.
We've got
No,
our
it is.
priorities all.
We
mixed
got to
up on
hyperstition
what's-
this thing.
Oh, sure,
what's
yes.
fucking important. Our priorities are all fucked.
Yeah. And our priorities could use a lot of constraint to guide them. And that
Yeah.
constraint should stem not from like an arbitrary idiot like me telling everybody what the constraints are, so much so as it should come from the fact that we are a specific kind of species in a specific kind of environment, needing specific kind of things, and to work ourselves and for the environment to work for us in that
Mhm.
environment. Like that's the context.
And we're
And if
also
we're missing that context, we're not
it's
going to have the
part of the
constraints.
context, and we're also
Yes,
people.
part.
We're also different people trying to communicate with each other using different languages and completely different experiences that we came up to have this worldview. This
That could have a universal representation because everybody goes through maybe
Right.
different experiences
So
but
this
at different
is-
times.
This is one of the
Yeah.
first things that you would want to communicate is the shape of ideology, sort of like the shape of belief.
And use that as a constraint.
And say, okay, well, just because when you say, okay, this is the shape of myth and belief can take these forms, that implies that everybody is grabbing onto them in different ways of different myths, different shapes, right?
Right.
That to bring that up to the front is to acknowledge right away that we're all coming from different places, right? And you have to translate.
So that's the expansion of possibility, but then we have to like have a contraction of responsibility, right? You can do whatever, you can flail your arms, you can, cause damage or whatever, but you don't. The reason for that is not because I'm not telling you not to, right? At this point in time, it's just like so there's a reason.
Challenge accepted.
There's a reason. There's a reason to sit down, right? Like there's a reason to
Yeah.
not do something,
Right.
and this is kind of trying to paint the picture of like what that reason is, and it's not coming from like again an authoritative. It's something that you need to realize for yourself. Like yes, I am. This is an internal education, right? Like it's not. I can't force this on you.
There's something
Plain and
regular
simple.
about all the different places that we go to. There's normal behavior, just
Yeah,
things
we
that
all
you're
sit on
expected to
couches,
do,
for example.
ways that you interact.
I mean, usually.
Customs, yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's comfy.
Well, nobody decided to sit on the table. It just didn't occur.
Oh, prove it wrong.
After I said it.
Just going with the flow. FYI.
Yeah.
This is gets back to axiology and the question of what is value. And
Good
what is my
point.
value on a market versus what is my value inherently as a human being?
To
How
me.
do I value myself?
Yeah, to me.
Right. So that's front and center for if you're getting spammed with
Yeah,
like
I don't,
crude.
I don't think it has that effect that you're suggesting, because if the situation is that everybody who contacts me is like somebody I don't really want to associate with,
Right.
value of yourself isn't going to rise, because nobody.
Yeah,
Well-
you've got that artificial demand though, so of course it's gonna rise.
But the number, but
Dustin's
why
right
would numbers?
in that there is some part of you that's being valued. Your kind of
You feel
ego,
validated
your
by
ego
it.
projection of your identity
Okay.
is being lifted up.
But
Yeah.
that's
But
like,
meanwhile, within internally inside, you may have decided that identity isn't as
That's a
important to
celebrity.
me as who I am myself.
that's a celebrity.
So you can
Or-
make that decision, like just because I'm valued as a celebrity or whatever,
That's what
mini
I'm saying, like,
celebrity.
If you talk, if you listen to celebrities talk, specifically ones that are, seem grounded, they will always tend to discuss of how detached that is,
Yeah.
right? Like they can't find their self-worth in the numbers of their fans. They just don't. If you want to look at somebody who's a perfect example of this, is the singer of Tool, who makes fucking fun of his fans for being a fucking
Dude,
retard.
Yeah, but he's such a pretender. Fucking-
He is not.
Weirdo.
He's not a pretender, but he is a weirdo though.
He's a fuck. Yeah, like
This-
I love Maynard, but yeah, like
This
he's
dude,
fucking
this
up.
dude is a prime example of like what people like with celebrity status
Sociopath.
should be feeling. Essentially, like they should be able to make fun of the situation, which is exactly what he's doing. He's making fun of the situation because he sees it for exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Like Hooker with a Penis. That song, he's screaming at his own fans that I sold out way before you heard of my name, and then you bought my record,
Right.
dipshit. Like
He knows
he's
he's
blatantly,
manipulating
he's
the system.
saying it like right
Then
out
you
there.
bought one.
Such a good song. I have it in my head now.
Yeah, I think there's a certain sense of like fucking.
You're gonna get us
narcissism.
copyright violated.
There's a certain extent of narcissism, even just being involved in social media, right? So you get that
But
validation.
social media is an
from-
amplifier. Like
If you're
like,
already
it's
like
a
that,
it's a mega it's a
if you're already
megaphone.
like that, it's gonna
So the people that are like you hear on social media are only the people with the megaphones, and the only people who are getting themselves a megaphone are the narcissists. So obviously
Mhm.
you're going
Yeah.
to see that.
No, that's true.
That's interesting.
Social media is the worst way to pick up on statistics. Like
It was shaped that way, though. It was shaped to be asymmetrical, with
Seems to
with
be.
with
It-
little
it-
with
it
like
feeds-
celebrities projecting down onto big groups.
it feeds currency.
We used to talk to each
It's all
other on
about
Facebook.
currency.
You remember, like people would write on each other's walls, and there'd just be messages from the people. Then it all came in like advertising, and it became like just to show you groups. Like you don't see anything. Nobody posts anything anymore. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like somehow it changed.
But even back then, it seems like you're secretly seeking approval for something, like giving updates on
Getting
fucking
likes.
doing this and that.
Of
Like,
course.
nobody gives a fuck what you're doing. Why are you telling people?
I'm taking a shit.
Yeah. You know?
Genya, you
So-
repost so many of your old just conversations left on the wall. Like it was a
I love
different.
them.
It was a different time.
Like it's
I
not
telling
love
you.
awesome.
them.
We
It's
don't.
like
we
a
don't even
snapshot.
remember that time anymore where we posted on each
I was
other's
re-
know,
I
it's
was
just-
reading what
it's
I was
'cause
saying
it's
to
so
one of
much
my-
way past that. But even like on the surface, it was always like just the fucking
Like, well, maybe
But that's
sucking
spread.
my own dick. Fucking
That was always the critique.
play my
Is
skin flute.
oh,
or
you're just
not my friend.
What's interesting to
you're just
note
making
is-
the appearance that you have such a great life.
Yeah.
What was interesting to note for me when I repost those things is like how many of the things I used to say I'm going to like flat out repeat
Right.
and just say them all over again, and how many of these I'm going to go like, that was an interesting time in my life.
Right.
right? Like growth. Like I use it as a bit of a reflection.
Sure.
That's why I post, by the way.
It's
my
interesting to
memories.
have a record of how your thoughts.
It just
have
pops it up
changed,
for me, so I'm like, okay,
right? Yeah.
I'll dig through it for a little bit.
Yeah.
A lot of it is like pictures of my kids from when they were just born or whatever,
Yeah,
and
well,
it's like, aww,
That's great. I mean,
that's my.
even just like that being out there in a way is kind of like, I don't know. That's
It's like a photo
it's a
album.
moral kind of issue.
I don't think about who looks at my Facebook.
right.
I'm looking at a photo album from a while ago.
But is it for you or is it for everybody in the world?
If y'all want to see,
I mean, it's simultaneously the same thing, but
I don't keep too many friends either. I'm
Right.
I'm currently under 200. I was under 100 for a while, but work relationships and shit.
yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
It just, yeah. I see the
There is a
pros and I see
vanity.
the cons to
There's
it.
a vanity to it, and then there's also like it's also a repetition of what you used to do with flipping an old album,
Yeah.
picture album.
Oh, for sure.
Like what people do that, right? And I
Yeah.
do. And
My phone
that's what I'm
fucking does
doing.
that for me automatically.
So when I'm
with Google.
so when I'm sharing my pictures of my kid on Facebook, it's
Yeah.
like I'm going through my photo album,
Right.
and I'm like, I love this photo album.
Yeah.
Put it back
yeah,
up.
Yeah, no, there's nothing wrong with that.
Repeat it again. Like why not?
But you know the risks potentially that are out there because you're basically broadcasting.
Yeah.
And
You're
it's
like-
actually not that difficult to host your own photo albums on your own computer or whatever, too.
Right.
Like, you can have your own collection of photos and, like, have an algorithm which
I'm a
groups them
typical
together.
user,
to
Okay,
guys.
so my Google does
But
that for
the
me
app-
automatically. It's like a remember this time 3 years ago, and then it's like.
I was
fucking
just
little
showing
funny
you that
pictures of
on,
it, or
on
like
my
related-
phone now,
that'll be
too.
related pictures.
It makes
The
these
phone does that
video
now.
albums of, like,
Yeah.
screen, all these different shots
Yeah,
coming
mine
and
does that.
going.
You only know this because
like,
because
music.
you got a new phone that just started doing it for you.
Right.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have known with the iPhone 6.
Right, but yeah, so your phone does that kind of automatically. Like I said, I'm not knocking anything you're doing, right? It's just like
I think
the
it
privacy.
did something.
There's no privacy there, right?
I never thought you were.
Yeah.
Like-
No, I mean teach his own, right? Like, how much you want to be putting yourself out there?
I
is
live in
your
this
choice.
world. It's
Right?
not like I won't have a Facebook profile whether I want to or not.
This is
Whatever.
also
Yeah.
this is also the guild market, the guild market dichotomy.
Yeah.
Genya, the guild market dichotomy of where your needs get met. Right?
Yeah.
If you can provide for yourself and host your own photos, then what Dustin is saying is validated essentially in your inaction.
I'll add to it. The biggest problem with spaces like Facebook, anywhere, all social media is that it ties you to a single identity.
Right.
Yeah.
We are not that.
And it markets you specifically though, through all these
So, like-
algorithms, right?
Right. You're a number. You're one number.
Interesting.
You're a
But
consumer.
We're not. We're
So
not that.
Facebook is a simulation, an attempt,
single
an
s-
attempted simulation.
So you know how I'm trying to say how self is what gets relegated to the narrative. You got your self-reference, but when it comes to
Right.
narrative,
Self is an
stories,
idea of a story
there's
about a
self.
thing going through time that's me.
that is repeated and repeated and repeated and repeated. So what this is trying to do is it's trying to solidify a single self to
Right.
to the very body that you're inhabiting.
Yeah.
Right.
So whatever growth you undergo, whatever changes that your mentality undergoes is completely
Right.
fucking.
And
No.
interestingly, this topic comes up with transition from participant coherence to membership coherence. When your whole worldview shifts that, wow, I'm not just this name. From
Well,
birth, I was this identity and everything's
but-
on my
And the
shoulders.
membership, it becomes
It's
even more
that
negative.
experience of
Yeah.
something more than just your name written down, how you spell it. That's not who you are. You're
Right.
something that changes moment to moment.
Yeah,
And
but
here's the
You're
thing.
building and growing and changing
you could
all
be
the time.
canceled for any number of things that you've said in the past, even
To
though you're
hold
not that same person.
On to
has
that
same-
identity. That's what we're
same-
talking about. Yeah,
so
A lot of
exactly.
people-
So
having
you
a
get
record of
it.
this can
Hey, guys,
fuck
You
right
see the
up.
problem.
Yeah.
We're not like that. People change.
Statistically realistically speaking, again, the people who talk most about being cancelled are
We're finding
ironically
political
very,
talking point.
Vocal on social media. So,
Right.
so they're not very cancelled like at all.
You're hearing it
Right.
from certain high up voices that speak to hundreds of thousands or millions of
Because
people,
if,
right?
because if people were really being cancelled, you would have heard nothing about it. Nothing. They would have disappeared.
Depends what the hot button topic is and where your status is, right?
No. I'm saying a
I
canceled
think
person,
you
a person who has been given zero platform,
Right.
cannot be on a platform speaking. It's a contradiction of fucking terms.
Yeah, but
Well, that's
when one
cancel
person when one person is not able to speak on any of the platforms anymore, suddenly, then
Yeah.
everybody talks about it on those platforms.
Right.
If they were truly cancelled, that conversation would have disappeared too. Because of the canceling.
Well,
But there's a
so
Streisand. There's a
people can still
Streisand.
talk about you if you can't
There's
participate
a-
in the conversation.
There's a
Right, if
Streisand
you're
effect.
canceling a person,
You
if
can't.
you're going through the effort of absolutely erasing that person.
Everybody
offline,
knows.
Everybody who's talking about you is going to get erased.
No,
It's a
that's not what
chain
happened.
reaction.
That's not what happened.
Because
Look at
people aren't
Alex
getting
Jones.
canceled.
You're still allowed on YouTube to talk about how he was not allowed to be there, right? The Streisand effect. You can't just squash something. The harder you squash, the more it's going to get out. At least the knowledge of it.
Right.
That Alex Jones was canceled.
Alex
Nobody's
Jones
heard
was
from
not-
him for a while. Why?
Alex Jones was not canceled. He got himself into very specific.
No, I'm
legal
just
problems.
I'm talking. I don't care about that. I'm talking about platform having your user ID blocked from getting access. I don't care about the reasons. That's across the spectrum of
You're
social
talking
media.
about
Across
No.
all social media.
When you're talking about private companies in that case,
Okay,
you're talking about
yes,
terms of
it's-
service, and they can do whatever the fuck they want.
Because it's a free country.
because that makes them money.
Yeah.
That's not canceling. That's corporations talking.
Meanwhile, you do have like
But the socials-
carrier capacity in order to be like an internet or telephone company. You have to neutrally give access to all people
Right.
equally.
And
You
we're
can't
in
just.
We're
You're
in
not
a
allowed.
field of where this medium is completely controlled by corporations.
There are laws like that. I'm saying that can push against that.
Right, and then use evidence of like what you've said in the past. Right.
Yes.
To kind of against you.
However, this is not what we're witnessing though. We're witnessing corporate pull tugging away at what state does, not the other way around. We're talking about the money entities, the profit entities, dictating laws towards the state such that the state comes back with laws for corporations stifling individuals.
Yeah, but freedom of speech laws are. That's what it
They're
seems to me.
circumvented.
Like
Yeah, we don't
why
really have
would
that
there be
here.
what they call like a common carrier
Elon
laws
Musk-
for
Elon
like
Musk got
people who
Twitter.
transfer data?
So
Like you have to
case in
be
point,
neutral.
Elon Musk got Twitter. Immediately, all dissent against Elon is suffering. Like, a complete censorship.
Huh?
This isn't coming from this isn't coming from a state. This is coming from the corporate entity. The thing that tries to exercise its
Yeah.
freedoms as a person.
Right.
So this is a skewed picture because this is saying that what the corporation did is what the state is doing, and therefore the state is guilty.
So
of what the
you're
corporation
saying
did.
I couldn't search Twitter for like Musk critique.
Fuck if I knew at this point.
So that's the thing. Like,
Twitter-
is this one of your talking points? Like, can we break this down?
Twitter has
I
had-
can't find a single negative comment about Elon Musk on Twitter right now.
Okay. Maybe you should witness the one. Maybe you should witness the one time where he is talking about all of his reporters, and then when the point of where he's getting asked questions he just doesn't like, and they don't follow whatever the fuck he's saying because it's bullshit, and they're like asking him real fucking questions about it. All he does is rage quits, and then lo and behold, you find the exact same reporters off the fucking page.
I don't know. I think these are just one-off examples, man.
It's not a one-off. It's one of many examples of this. He literally went out of his way to purge all criticism of himself from Twitter. And whenever this
Well, that kind of makes sense,
the
though.
X-Files
In a way, like that as a special case makes sense. Because you want your company to succeed.
When the X-Files plot didn't turn out because he was going to release all these files, apparently getting
Oh, the Twitter files?
the liberals to be guilty of everything, it didn't pan out. And what did he do? Fucking erase it as if it never fucking happened.
The
because
Twitter files are still there.
they're still there. They don't say anything. Therefore, he's not talking about them anymore. He doesn't talk about them anymore for a very specific reason. They don't say shit.
Well, it's proved that they suppressed that whole Hunter Biden fucking story.
Yeah, that's
What-
true.
Which is what?
That's one part of it. There's
Yep.
there's a
It
bunch
was
of other
that
stuff
that
too.
story was purged from Twitter before Elon Musk even took it over.
I want to know what you know about it.
Well, that they basically put it, like, made it a non-issue, right? Stopped it from getting circulated.
They
right?
banned-
Said it was called it misinformation.
They banned the New York Post, or they blocked the New York Post.
What it proved was that it was definitely left leaning, and that they were censoring more conservative
It was stopped from being
sources.
circulated because it had nudity in it, which went against the terms
Oh, that's
and
it?
services of Twitter.
Oh, there's more of the
That was the reason. That was the reason of why
No.
the actual
That's
information was
that's
removed
what
from
what
Twitter.
they legally
It
said,
had-
right? Sure.
It had images that went against the
Yeah, but-
terms and condition of Twitter to begin
But wait.
with. That was the reason.
So they say, yeah.
The New York Times had a
It's also
post
they say,
about it.
There's also evidence of
Dude.
the Trump administration right before that getting
There
all
was-
sorts of shit.
There was a
trying to
piece
be
in the
removed
New York
Okay.
Times, wasn't there, about the laptop, and that's the story that got taken off, censored. The link to the New York
from there.
Times story,
I don't know about the laptop.
the link to
but
the New
I
York
know
Times
about Biden.
story was shut off. It
know
wasn't the
about-
content itself. The story, they're not having titties
I don't-
flashing around.
Look, I
on-
don't know
on their-
anything
their
about
newspaper.
That particular story, so I can't comment. But I do know that story, the story about Hunter Biden.
I know
shit
there's
removed.
I know there's porn on the
Everything to
laptop.
do-
This is a story that was
Yeah,
censored.
But Twitter doesn't
A
service
story was
porn.
published.
And so they
The
removed
story
it.
doesn't have porn. The story had no
Hunter
porn in
Biden's
it.
picture were explicit.
Okay,
That was
what
the
the
reason
Twitter
for their
files
removal.
proved was that it was totally left-leaning, and that they had wiped out a lot of conservative stories. That would have
That's the
changed the
running-
narrative
that
on
is
a
the
lot of
story.
things. So that's exactly
Including
what the
this
Twitter
New
files-
York Post
That's the
story
story.
that had no nudity
The
in it.
issue
So
is
why are
that-
you removing this story about the thing? You're saying,
Well,
oh, your story has nudity?
I'm
That's
telling
why
you,
it was
I'm
canceled?
telling you. I don't know anything about the computer stuff because I didn't look into it. I do know that Hunter
There's
Biden's
nudity.
story has everything to do with the very same terms and conditions that Twitter set out beforehand.
What,
That's-
you're not allowed to report on crime? As a news outlet? You're not allowed to? Your
I'm
article
not
is going to be
speaking to
removed?
that.
Even though your article has
I'm
no
not
porn?
speaking to that because that's not the story I can comment on. I'm commenting on the fact that the one scenario that I know everything about, quote unquote,
They were originally
is
saying
it's
that
not a
it,
scenario
it was-
that is worth even
They were saying it was
investigating.
misinformation.
it was
yeah.
because of, I thought it was because of hacked, like, it was because of hacked material. That was one of the original
You
reasons
thought.
they were using. No, this was
thing
what's
is-
reported at the time.
Okay, but there's different reports that Rashawn referring to. So, I mean, 6 to 1, half a dozen to the other, or what is more
But
plausible?
Fact is, like, pretty.
Is it plausible that people who hate this fucking administration are going to churn out story after story after story after story, as they have been known to do for the past fucking century?
Same as
Or-
like
or-
them
or-
talking
or is
shit
it-
about
or is it the
Elon every
technicality?
chance. And
Or is it
saying
technicality
Tesla's
that has
pulling
nothing
out.
to do with what's being said?
I think that's what Elon's doing there is like free speech with Twitter.
Elon
Like
is
that's
not
all.
doing fuck all for free speech.
That's all he seemed to do with that company. Like fire all the content moderators. Like he fired all the censorship staff.
Right, yeah.
That was 80% of the company just vanished.
Fire people that know how
and then the systems
where he
kept.
gets his news
Then
from,
the
eh?
systems kept running. They just kept running, and people kept tweeting. Can you imagine that?
Oh man.
Crazy.
Free for all.
I know. Just
How dare
pure,
different opinions be out there?
pure anarchy.
What?
Done?
Yeah.
Yeah, we were talking about Musk as the archetypal, hostile.
Charlatan.
More specifically, the.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Owner?
No. Well, yeah. But what are the layers again?
For.
Callous.
Right. That's what you're talking about. The hostility layer.
Yeah. He's the
He's
archetypal
so
callous.
he's so dead to it that it's just the concept doesn't exist to it. It doesn't matter what words you use or what language or context or any of those things. It falls on deaf ears. Absolutely, yeah. But again, callous, yes. However, it's not from a perspective of like looking at him as an evil individual or any of those things where like conspiratorial sort of like angle. He's trying to destroy the world kind of deal. I don't think that. What I'm actually.
That's not what hostility is. It's
what
technically dysmorphism in your model.
Right. What I would point to really here is stupidity and idiocy, right? Like the doubling down on the objective subjective stupidity to resolve objective subjective stupidity. That sort of like mental disconnect to me is what I would describe as idiocy. To see
Right.
that it's stupid and to go ahead and do the stupid
You're kind
thing.
of like painting the picture of an ideology which claims to fix itself, yet it's an ideology.
That's broken
Right.
to begin with. So it's broken and trying to fix itself. So all of its fixes
Broken
are
tool.
broken by definition.
Made by broken tools.
Yeah. So that's the story there. Like I don't care about Musk as like an actual character in the world, so to speak. I have I think my emotional response has more to do with the quantity of damage in the short amount of time span that this individual has caused in our recent history. So
I don't know. I think one time
freedom of speech was definitely
we may
not a
revisit
thing.
the origins of government, let's say colonial government, or not colonial, but capitalist government on the North American continent, like where it came from, like the values, like for American values.
Capitalism proper and capitalism per model are actually different things. So capitalism as a functional economic concept, that's what you're talking about, colonial times. Capitalism as the problem of counting predates that by history itself.
Yeah, and we talked about ownerism as well as an idea, of even just the idea of having identity sort of bounded law contractually owning things, and that's how there's sort of this machine language and exchange in society.
It's funny that even at this stage, you're seeing a calcification of subjectivity going on right there.
The self-object
in the APS.
becomes unchanging.
Because who is the owner and who is not the owner and all of that is part and parcel to one single contract.
And so if you have the language used to describe this kind of stuff, what's going on, you're able to change the context.
Navigate, not change.
Navigate the context.
Right, because context is emergent. Like, you don't control it that way. Like you can in the programming sense, if you're trying to define an algorithm, but when it happens to you, when the APS is functioning, right, you don't get to choose which mountaintop you're in.
Right.
That happens to you.
There's a historical context, if you will, bound to causality of the past, as we call
The
it.
previous moment. That's what builds that up. each moment has the potential to rearrange everything to do with the context. Right? Because, for example, you're talking about a subject, and in that subject, you talk about the meta subject of that subject. All of a sudden, you switch the context. And the next moment you're talking about it, like, say, I had a
And
thought
so
about a thought. So
when we talk about meta, we should be using this stacking language model, the holonic model, with the strange loop idea, because
I do this
to go meta means you're diving down a language layer, and to go meta of that, you go yet again down, and it's kind of like a gradient, sort of of meta.
with the added twist of all of those layers are only represented in the layer in which you're working at. So there's work to do with making sure that they're isomorphic and properly isomorphic
Right.
before you even engage in putting it all together at the layer you're at.
Right. Out of ignorance, to just drop a model onto something, say you are this.
So yeah, without touching the isomorphisms, you get your runaway process that we've been discussing,
Right.
which takes less energy to do, which can explain why it's the favored trajectory
And I
of
think
civilized mind.
This is points right to like the guild language, I think.
Yeah, I think we're reasonably only can extrapolate a little bit more on that and then finish it off there.
Yeah, right. I was just kind of
Time limits.
putting it in context.
Yeah, no, it's a great. It is the context, because once we have the capacity to express the domain, whichever domain it may be, the very first task is to express the guild domain, and that includes the subtask of defining the fundamental guilds,
Right.
which include their own subtasks of what membership means, what natural guilds mean, and what proximity means. So all of that, just like it's a self-emergent system. So by saying we need the guild language, you're saying you need the fundamental guild languages with all of the details inside. So the guild language is actually very complex, because it includes the guild as a whole. It includes the fundamental guilds being the guild as a whole. See how that turned around to become the exact same thing? That's what makes it complicated, this looping. Membership as a guild and to the guild as a whole. Again, it's no matter which way you step off in any direction, you loop right back to the beginning. Natural guilds, which talk about the guild as a whole and define its protocols, and proximity guilds, which talk about the guild as a whole and how it communicates. Network guilds. So even though you start with the guild as a whole as your premise, and you start to break it down into its subcomponents, each subcomponent are completely in reference to the guild as the whole. And that language therefore becomes extremely complicated as soon as you add all the details. So with the natural guilds, education, immunity, environment, all of these guilds are in terms of the guild as the whole.
That's really kind of the tough part and discouraging about encountering trying to describe the guild, like as in terms of protocols and whatnot, to be able to socially organize in light of this kind of model, is that once you start describing one little tiny corner, one piece, it pulls the whole thing, comes into view.
Right. That's just an example of self-reference. So what we can do is, instead of pulling all of the guild as a whole into those descriptions, we can have a symbol to stand in for that. The guild. Right? So every time the guild is mentioned, it's that reference back to the whole. And that way, in the language, you can have that self-referential element. So you can have the guild, you can have membership guild, you can have natural guild, you can have education guild, references.
It's like having a file, like a .guild file in every directory that points towards back down its own tree branch.
Mm-hmm.
Back to the root.
That's a good way to visualize it.
The root being the guild itself.
It sits in the guild directory. So if you need to jump out the context, you go to the bigger directory, the encompassing directory, which includes even more
It's
things.
represented in Linux like with a dot.
Yeah.
As in previous directory.
/
Self-reference.
/ //
You don't have to tell it to go to a specific place just to go back one folder. You just say, from wherever I am now, that's your self-context.
Yeah.
Go back one.
Assuming we have a neat tree. Unfortunately, with the many-to-many relationships that we have, this tree is not that neat. So when you jump back, you might actually jump forward. There is that conundrum, or jumping forward gets you back. So this is why these references are interesting, because if you have the guild, and then you use the guild here in a deeper layer, and the guild in the deeper layer, and the guild in an even deeper layer, well, if that layer needs to know what the fuck's going on, it's just it's using that reference to go all the way back to the outside to to get its information and do its thing. So it doesn't really matter how deep you jump in the language, in the conceptual hierarchy, so long as your subjective hierarchy allows you to come back and forth in a logical way back through those stacks. Trouble begins is when the context switches and it adopts a completely different meaning, and then what you're going back and forth through makes no fucking sense.
Feels like walking through a portal.
Right. Or in the APS language, you've switched the context in a way that was never anticipated by the actual context switching algorithm. Like, the context switching algorithm did its thing, but the context you landed in is not the one you'd expect it to be. So whatever happens next, whatever's asked of the program next, is like, doesn't mesh with what's going on in the environment itself. Dysmorphism. That's one way to describe dysmorphism. Wrong subject. You landed in the wrong mountain peak for the task you're supposed to do. The second one would be you don't have the right peak at all. The contexts you're building are generally just not useful. That has nothing to do with jumping. It just has to do with lack of information.
Right. I find it interesting that if you want to know what is the right peak, you have to be rooted or centered somehow on your self-reference itself.
And again, that comes down to skill.
Because this is where you find the information that you can use to navigate at its raw level, like beyond kind of...
And the point of me jamming that phrase in, this is all coming down to skill, is this. It's not going to just come to you. I mean, sure, maybe sometimes, if you have the skill without knowing it. But ultimately, that is the maturation bit that I was alluding to earlier. That is the skill that defines maturation at the end of the day. Giving maturation itself a meaning, right? And in that, making maturation the meaning of one's own life.
You're talking about transcending the existing local minima of your ideology of what you think is reality and all that, and to be able to flow with new information of what's right in front of you,
Mm-hmm.
but to treat every niche of reality with this same respect, we'll call it, of sensitivity.
And as easy as we're making it sound, that's actually the toughest thing to do
It's very
in
difficult.
actual one's life.
I found in guitar playing, actually, after 15 years, there is such a thing as feeling the strings, if you could believe it,
I do.
which is totally distinct from the usual having a model in your head of what you're going to pluck and what you're going to do.
There's shapes on the guitar that you are seeking, right? There's not like I'm aiming to play note X. I'm aiming to play note Y. There's mostly like I need this shape. I need that shape. I need this shape. And these shapes need to dance. So
This is a lot of still mind, if you will,
I get it in the principle.
invocation of music, as a Bush Whisperer would say. An invocation of music, in other words, taught through scholarly means to read a script and say, okay, I know these permutations, like I need to be in this shape, in that shape, I'm in this mode, I'm in that scale.
Is the hello? Hi.
So
What were we saying?
pretty much out of here
Yeah.
very soonish.
What were we saying? Were we saying?
Something hyperstition, models, upload, download, ideas.
I think the closing words, the most useful ones that we can have, is to touch a little bit on the spectrum of stupidity and idiocy. As a result of that, to explain a little bit better as to why such phrases came out.
We should
Again.
more explicitly connect the spectrum of stupidity with charlatanism,
Mm-hmm.
too, I think.
Fair.
Potentially.
That's fair. That's fair. But for the sake of just closing off today, let's not connect the two, but just go into what stupidity is in this parlance. And
Yeah, we're pretty much
why-
out of here. I was just going to say, Jacob did join us. Oh, he just posted something else, too. Did you want to finish your thought before we read this?
Sure.
Okay.
So, yeah, I think the closing thought there is just to say that the spectrum of stupidity has been made the a medium, if you will, to represent the neurotic and psychotic attachment to the dream.
And there's this subjective and objective dichotomy kind of split
Right,
apart, where you have the scientific mind on one side, the religious on the other.
Right. And then you have that dichotomy split again between the two, in which the objective mind gets split up into its scientism and its philosophism. And then you have your solipsistic side divided into its religionism and spiritualism.
Right.
So within these four quadrants, it's basically objectivism and solipsism turned 90 degrees, if you will. That's what makes the quadrants.
Yeah, Jacob got it about the comment about feeling the strings, if you will. What you went on to describe was, again, kind of mental patterns imposed. In a sense, what I was describing is how the strings feel back to you in that tactile sense of the moment, because they're telling you what they're singing. You can feel it.
Okay.
And you can feel where it's coming to you on the guitar.
Okay.
And use that in a feedback.
Yeah, I get it. Totally get it. Like I'm feeling my own car. Or
Like,
something.
and after 15 years, I'd seen comments about this, and I'm like, what? Yeah,
I'm having this experience with my car right now.
And
That's what's happening.
I noticed. I guess you can be much more relaxed if you're in the feel of it, as opposed to the mind. Like,
When you don't care.
you've got your fingers so close to sensing the strings and their position, you just know what's happening exactly.
Yeah. And you
right?
don't care.
You're not trying to impose a pattern
Exactly,
or do
yeah.
something or.
That's the same feeling I was trying to talk
Right.
to Justin about.
So yeah, interestingly, Bush Whisperer talked about that in relation to what he was calling, and I agree with, invocation and evocation. Invocation to invoke a spell or something from the mind down onto the body, like, come Holy Spirit, this kind of stuff or whatever. And evocation to be talking to a more abstract spirit, if you will, in that you're allowing the space. You're not having a idea of what's about to come to you, but you're allowing room. You're opening up the space for a spirit to come, if
The
you will.
difference between working as a warrior and being the warrior. Working as a warrior, you're just fulfilling specific tasks. You invoke algorithm after algorithm after algorithm after algorithm.
Right, the top-down control.
Evocation, you are warrior. Whatever the spirit of warrior is.
Right. And that's all it is like a shell.
And your behavior.
The mind just is a shell, like a cup to be filled.
Yeah.
Okay,
With
this cup, my body
if you
is
will.
now the cup. Let me be filled with this spirit. Right.
Right, and have it enact its actions.
It's
Yeah.
a
So
subtle
being the
kind
warrior.
of difference, but it highlights the mind-body disconnect and the
Being the-
importance thereof.
The difference is being the warrior as in taking on the role of the warrior versus being the warrior as in expressing the archetype of the warrior.
Most people wouldn't be able to make a distinction.
As in my warrior is your warrior. Like that's the one warrior. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, and expand it to a clan, like an entire warrior clan, if you will. They're all inhabiting the same one archetype, warrior, expressed in this one, or hunter, whatever. Make it less violent, I guess.
Right.
But yeah, like that seems to be the difference between evocation and invocation, in that one is trying to fulfill the algorithm and assert its protocols, whereas the other one is
You brought
becoming
up
the
the
medium
social.
of the protocol.
You brought up the social, which implies sensing of how others express those archetypes as well.
Where's my
The dildo.
This is the reference.
Yeah. So, anyways, that once again, we've
Didn't get
accomplished.
to where we wanted to, but accomplished
a lot.
what we wanted to.
Yep. So
Yeah.
we didn't get into Portal
Offices.
Mountain World Summit or the offices, which was like kind of the main stuff. But hey, we had Dustin over. It was a great success. Good conversation.
And I think with distractions like that,
Good vibes.
Or sorry, not distractions. My apologies, but with guests, it should be
Right.
acceptable to completely deviate from intended.
Well, this is the evocation of the live stream, right?
Yeah.
We're
Taking the moment
allowing.
for what it is.
It makes sense that hey, if we have a guest speaker, like we're sorry
Yeah, talk to
everybody
them.
who wanted to hear about the latest Portal Mountain shit. Too bad.
Yeah, we gotta talk
we're
to
just
them.
gonna go deep into like meet them where they are. You know, a guest, listen to them, like
I do-
skills. Right? We're not the masters, but we're skilled.
We're not formal, and
we're
I
building.
apologize for the noise. It's my Sacramento burrito.
Peace out, Jacob. And with that, to all a good week.